Tonight, you walk in Middle-earth, where hobbits rise, shadows linger, and legends whisper through the trees. The morning mist curls around the rounded hills of Hobbiton like a gentle shawl, catching the gold of a barely risen sun. You step along a narrow dirt lane that winds between gardens brimming with late flowers and the smell of fresh bread slipping from unseen kitchens. Somewhere further on, a rooster crows with stubborn insistence, and the smoke of a cozy hearth drifts upward in lazy plumes. The world feels small, safe, and meant for laughter. Yet beneath this calm surface lies a thrum, a quiet music that tells of journeys reaching far beyond the Shire. This isn't just a tale, it's the journey of an age, told slowly so you can drift off to the rhythm of battles, songs, and quiet starlight. And while you relax here in the comfort of your pillow, Middle-earth opens itself as a dreamland only half remembered. What if the very soil beneath your feet remembered the footsteps of those who would carry the fate of the world? What if every breeze over Bag and carried rumors of kings, wizards, and creatures both noble and terrible? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. You'll want to stick around, because this isn't just one story. It's the start of a full series exploring the realms, myths, and heroes that shaped Middle-earth. You won't want to miss what comes next. Comment your location and what time you're listening. We love hearing where our sleepy historians are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, let the soft rustle of leaves be your lullaby, and ask yourself, which path would you have taken, with the Fellowship or alone? Ahead of you, Hobbiton sprawls with quiet charm. There is Bagshot Row, with the tidy homes trimmed to perfection, and above it all rests Bag End, dug deep into the hill with a round green door that seems to smile in sunlight. You hear the bray of donkeys lugging sacks of root vegetables, the laughter of children as they tumble down grass-covered banks, and just beyond the hedges, the slow bubbling of a brook. The Shire is simplicity itself, yet don't be fooled. Beneath this patchwork of gardens and lanes lies the spark of history. As you breathe in the morning air, you walk not only into a place of comfort, but into the starting point of one of the greatest movements in legend. Look closely at the everyday habits of hobbits, and you realize something. History often begins disguised as ordinary life. They love food, ale, music, and comfort, but it is precisely this innocence that creates a contrast with the looming darkness beyond their borders. By choosing the hobbits as the starting point, Tolkien anchors an immense myth in something our hearts recognize, a longing for a safe home. That tug of hearth and garden makes the sacrifice, when they leave it, shine brighter. As you stroll past fields of tilled soil, picture yourself crunching crisp apples straight from the orchard, hearing the bees hum as they slip into clovers. The lives of these small folk revolve around farming, festivals, and friendships. Yet already, rumors flit around like birds restless before a storm. Fires on distant hills, strange travelers on the East Road, and a certain eccentric hobbit named Bilbo Baggins with crates of treasure and tales of dragons all whisper that everything is about to change. You see Sam Gamgee bending beside a flower patch, murmuring kindly as though speaking to the soil itself. You picture Frodo walking slowly with a book under his arm, his gaze straying toward the horizon instead of the ground, as if already restless to be gone. Their lives are stitched into the comfort of this community, and yet both carry endless potential for roads that stretch deeper than maps. Perhaps you too begin to imagine what choice you would make if called beyond hedges and hills into the wide and dangerous world. The Shire at Dawn holds hints of more than it seems. The smell of tilled earth, grass heavy with dew, the sleepy cries of chickens, all are tokens of peace. And yet, peace never lasts in Middle-earth. Already, the world to the east stirs, and tales of an ancient enemy begin whispering like smoke on the wind. The sleepy folk who value their second breakfasts might never believe it, but something vast and terrible is stirring, and this tranquil valley is on the edge of its shadow. You imagine the Bag End study, lined wall to wall with maps, quills, and tomes, where Bilbo once scrawled of trolls, goblins, and riddles in the dark. Those artifacts of adventure are tucked quietly away now, leaving Frodo to inherit the weight of a ring hidden in a drawer. One unbroken circle of gold, small enough to lose between cushions, yet large enough to command the fear of an age. From this peaceful start, you can almost feel the faint tremor underfoot, the calm before the storm. The hobbits are unaware of the shadows creeping closer, but you, dear listener, hear them already. The edges of your dream walk ripple with uncertainty. Each flower by the hedgerow glows in the soft new light, but dark riders are saddling steeds far away, their cries cracking the silence. Each loaf of bread just pulled from the oven feels like a blessing, but soon there will be days when bread is a memory, and only Limbus travels with you through wasted lands. The Shire exists in a pocket of timelessness, a perfect bubble, and that is why it is so heartbreakingly beautiful when pierced. Pause here. Take in the air, the softness of dawn. Let the scene settle gently, like a blanket warming you as you drift towards sleep. This beginning, gentle and ordinary, is precisely what makes the aching journey ahead meaningful. Ordinary lives, knowingly or not, stand at the front of history's greatest swelling tide. As you lift your eyes toward the horizon, where mists thin and the sky rains light on endless hills, you realize your first steps out of Hobbiton are also first steps into legend. And so your wandering begins. The path from Bag End curves slowly away from the hill, out past the Green Dragon, and where ale sloshes into mugs, where song lingers into the night, and where the troubles of the world are sung away for a moment. But you keep walking. The road may look quiet and small from here, a track of dirt through round doors and patched fences, but you know the truth. All roads in Middle-earth begin and end with steps in the Shire, and your feet are on that trail now. Every legend needs a humble start, and tonight's is beneath a sky awash in quiet morning. You follow the road eastward, further away from Hobbiton's laughter, the green doors, and the easy comforts of the Shire, until the warm scent of bread and clover fades into memory. Instead, the path straightens, lined with hedges gone a little wild, and the air grows cooler, almost as though a distant shadow has stretched its fingers westward. Here is where whispers of rings begin to echo, not just the one, but all the rings forged in that ancient age, long before hobbits tilled fields or puffed their pipes at dusk. Imagine yourself stepping into a hall dim as twilight, its air humming with secrets, and before you lies the story of the rings of power. These were not merely trinkets or treasures to adorn fingers. They were vessels of will, reservoirs of influence, gifts that promised greatness while weaving chains tighter than iron. You sense that this history clings to every hill and valley you cross, carried in murmurs by wandering travelers, and before sleep takes you, the weight of these tales settles gently into your mind, like dust on forgotten tomes. Once upon an earlier age, the elves of a region, wise though they were, turned their minds to craft. They longed not merely for beauty, which was already theirs, but for permanence. For what is the ache of the elves? It is the fading of all that they create, the slow waning of their glory. And so, under the guidance of the greatest smiths, guided most of all by Celebrimbor, they reached their hands eagerly towards secrets of making. It is said that Sauron, cloaked in fair disguise as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, walked among them then. He spoke of wisdom, of vision, of the ability to preserve their lands against decay. The elves were clever, proud, and hopeful, and though they distrusted many strangers, they chose to believe. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the forges. Glowing chambers filled with the hiss of metal meeting fire, the rattle of hammers striking sparks into the dark, and thin strands of elvish song carried between strokes. Craft here was never steel alone, but art infused with spirit. From their labor emerged the foundations of legend, the rings of power. 19 in total, wrought from fire, song, and craft beyond mortal skill. Each was meant to strengthen, preserve, and empower. A gift, or so they believed. 3 were claimed by the elves, the purest, the fairest, Narya, Ninya, and Vilya. Unlike the others, these were untouched directly by Sauron's hand, though he had still taught the craft that birthed them. They did not corrupt but preserved, helped the elves delay their fading, and hold a fragment of beauty against time's tide. Their wielders shine in memory: Gil-galad, Círdan, Galadriel, and later Gandalf. These rings were not tools of domination, but shields against despair, preserving hidden havens of light amid growing dark. 7 rings were gifted, or perhaps tricked, into dwarf lords' hands, each ruler of a house proud and stubborn. They did not bend as men might. The dwarves' hearts were too fixated on craft, stone, and treasure to bend willingly beneath another's command. Instead, these rings inflamed a mortal weakness already present: greed. Ancient treasure hoards grew beneath mountains, guarded jealously, cursed by suspicion. Gold poured in, alliances crumbled, shadows leaked into the cracks. Though Sauron could not fully enslave dwarves, he could twist their desire until their kingdoms trembled and dragons came sniffing for the scent of burning treasure. And then there were 9. The fateful 9 rings for mortal men, proud chieftains, sorcerers, kings, who accepted their gifts with open hands and eager ambition. To them, the rings whispered of power without consequence, strength that outlasted lifespans, and the glory of realms that would flourish forever. At first, their kingdoms brightened, their renown spread, and their enemies quaked. But the cost arrived, stealthy as a shadow at dusk. For men, unlike elves or dwarfs, were swiftly hooked. Their lifetimes stretched unnaturally, becoming ropes binding them, until breath turned to wheeze, flesh thinned to shadow, and one day they awoke no longer men but ringwraiths. Bound utterly to Sauron, they were his echoing servants, his will-given dreadful form. If you stand still now, you might almost hear their faint cries riding on distant winds. Yet above all of these glittered one ring, simple and slender, forged not in a region, but in the fires of Orodruin itself, Mount Doom, where lava bled from the world's wounds. The Dark Lord smiled, for while all others counted gifts on their hands, he held a single band into which he poured himself, his essence, his soul. The one ring was not a bauble, but the tether to his being. It ruled the others, found them, corrupted them, unmasked their bearers. And thus the heart of this long dream of yours is revealed. All tales in this land bend around that golden circle. Imagine for a moment how the world must have shifted when this truth became known. Gil-galad, Elrond, Celebrimbor, heroes whose names echo softly in lore, sought to resist Sauron's design. Wars raged, strongholds fell, Celebrimbor himself tortured and slain, his body hung as a warning. Those who had believed in gifts discovered only betrayal. And though elves hid their 3 and dwarves hoarded their 7, though men wore theirs until no man remained at all, still the one ring kept its claim. The Shire, where you just walked so peacefully, has no inkling of this ancient calamity. To them, rings are merely tokens of betrothal or jewelry locked in a chest. Yet hobbits will one day carry the weight of this entire saga upon their shoulders. And this is one of the many soothing ironies Tolkien wove into his myth, that the simple are made instruments of salvation, while the wise and mighty stumble under heavier burdens. As per the books, Tolkien describes the rings less as weapons and more as amplifiers of what already exists in the wearer's heart. An elf desires preservation of beauty, so the rings amplify this yearning. A dwarf lusts after wealth, and the hoards grow and twist their hearts. Men ache for dominion, and so their lives are extended until their hunger consumes them entirely. Here, in this subtle notion, lies one of Tolkien's quiet masterstrokes. Evil rarely creates something new, but instead manipulates what already lives in hearts. It is a corruption by degrees, a soft turning of desire into chain. And perhaps this is why the tale continues to resonate across eras. The rings become metaphors not just for power, but for temptation writ small. Who among us, offered something that promises strength, longevity, or prosperity, could say no without hesitation. You imagine slipping such a simple golden band onto your hand. Perhaps at first, you too would find your life smoother, doors opened, whispers of wisdom brushing your ear. But in dreams, shadows linger. Each day the ring grows heavier, your reflection thinner, your laughter less your own. How far before the self dissolves entirely? Walking further along the road, your thoughts cloud with this history until each breeze carries pieces of stories. An elven smith hammering tirelessly, a dwarf glaring over jewels until sleep forgets him, a mortal king clutching his ring while shadows creep across his throne room floor. Each story threads into the loom of the present. And here you are, one small wanderer on the edge of it all, carrying deeper into the twilight of Middle-earth. Theories ripple around the nature of the rings too, as if the tale itself invites you to wonder. Did the dwarven rings play some role in the awakening of the dragons, since greed calls fire as kindling calls flame? Did each of the 9 once attempt to resist Sauron, but found themselves undone by ambition? And if the 3 elven rings were preserved from corruption, how deeply did their bearers truly feel the whisper of their connection to the One? For even without touching, there remained a tether. Some suggest the elves' dominion, the timelessness of Lórien, the ships that sailed from the havens, owed itself as much to their magical preservation as to faith itself. You reach a bend in the road, and suddenly the hills shift around you as if the land itself remembers. This journey is as much one of history as of myth, and while you drift through these thoughts, the night, or perhaps the dream, unfurls further. You don't need to decide the answers now. The beauty of Middle-earth lies not merely in facts, but in questions that tremble in the still air. What you feel in these whispers of rings is not dread, but the soothing rhythm of patterns across time. Power always rises and falls. Greed always blossoms and fades. But there's comfort in recognizing it, in walking through the stories already played out while you settle toward rest. So sleepily now, as crickets begin to sing in the hedgerows, you let the tale blur into imagination. Great golden forges cool, and the laughter of hobbits far behind calls gently, like an echo within you. The rings glimmer faintly in your thoughts, curiosities that shaped kingdoms, and yet here they are only images flickering softly, as if projected upon the canvas of night. Your journey eastward stretches on, and the earth holds you, steady and kind, cradling you like a lullaby born of stone and story. You continue along the winding eastern road, and as twilight settles in your dreamlike journey, the friendly cottages and bustling markets of the Shire fade fully behind you. In their place rises Rivendell, hidden within a deep valley, with waterfalls tumbling like liquid crystal down sleek cliffs, and stone bridges shaped as though they grew naturally from the rock. Here, amid the swaying pines and the luminous autumn trees, Elrond has summoned a great council. You step slowly into the courtyard, where sunlight breaks through the canopy to gild the surfaces with gold, and where voices from far and near converge upon the same stone circle. This is not a gathering of leisure. It is a convocation shaped by doom, for no one here can remain untouched by the decisions that must follow. From where you stand on the periphery, you notice the range of faces. Long-bearded dwarves with eyes that glint as warily as steel, men cloaked in the scars of rough travel, fair elves whose hands look like they could both wield weapons and compose ballads. And then, smaller than all the rest, hobbits. Frodo seated nervously, Sam standing loyally behind him, with Merry and Pippin whispering at the edge, trying desperately to look as though they belong. By the mere presence of these hobbits, the air already feels transformed. For though elves and men know of wars and shadows long past, the hobbits have stumbled impossibly into the center. The council draws them in like a stone into the very whirlpool of Middle-earth's crisis. Elrond himself presides calmly, his voice both commanding and kind, like a river whose strength lies in the persistence of its flow rather than the sharpness of its current. He recounts the history of the ring, the oldest secrets from the forging to its rediscovery in Bilbo's adventures. As his words weave together, you look towards Frodo, and for just a moment, it feels as though this quiet hobbit is shrinking into his chair, wishing only for a return to his hearth. But the ring does not respect such wishes. It lies heavy in its pouch, gleaming whenever drawn forth. Its golden circle seems to emit a light too bright for such a small object. You cannot forget what you learned on the road, that its nature is entwined deeply with the fate of all here assembled. What begins polite, almost scholarly, quickly blooms into heated argument. Dwarves growl of vengeance against Sauron and the need for secure stone halls. Men debate the danger against their fragile kingdoms. Elves stress the preservation of memory and beauty. Each voice insists upon a path forward, as though Middle-earth itself could be carved by opinions, swords, and fire. And through it all sits Frodo, a gentle thread woven across the clamor, for no one yet truly admits the truth. The choice has already found him. When Boromir rises, his presence changes the air. His voice, bold and full of conviction, carries not only duty but yearning. Minas Tirith, the towered city of his people, teeters against Sauron's encroaching might. He gazes at the ring and sees not doom but deliverance. For if such a weapon belongs in the hands of any, why not those who stand against the legions of Mordor directly? The others stir uneasily, some nod, some bristle. You see the shadow of temptation here, how even valorous men find it nearly impossible to resist the lure of a power so total. It is in these moments that the theory of choice simmers beneath the scene. Did Elrond truly intend for the council to decide? Or did he already know only one path exists? The destruction of the ring in the very flame that birthed it? The council is less a decision-making body and more, perhaps, an unveiling of destiny. Frodo was brought not so much to volunteer as to realize there had never been an alternative. This subtle ambiguity reminds you that in Tolkien's world, free will and fate twist together. The choice freely made may also have been inevitable. As per the books, the council scene is rendered long and deliberate, stretching beyond debates into layered accounts of history. How Gollum was captured and questioned, how Saruman's betrayal was unveiled, and how each leader bore knowledge or grievance into the conversation. The film adaptation, by contrast, condenses this into a storm of interruption, a tempest of raised voices drowned beneath the ring's ominous hum. Both versions, however, stitch the core idea into your mind. Unity is as fragile as it is necessary. Without unity, there can be no hope. With it, even the smallest may carry the heaviest burdens. When Frodo finally rises, silence breaks across the council's circle like glass shattering on stone. His voice is soft, almost shaking, but his words bear more strength than any weapon. "I will take it," he says, though in your drifting, dreamy narration, you rephrase it gently. He acknowledges aloud what his heart has already understood, that he cannot turn aside the call. The silence after is even louder than Boromir's speeches or Gimli's growls. All know they have just witnessed the pivot of history, not in the clash of warriors, but in the trembling courage of the smallest present. And so the fellowship is born, not by decree alone, but by an instinctive gathering of the few willing to bind their bonds in service of this quest. Gandalf, already close to Frodo, offers wisdom. Aragorn, long in the wild but destined for thrones, offers protection. Legolas, elf prince with keen eyes, pledges his bow. Gimli, stout yet unyielding, lifts his axe. Boromir, even while conflicted, agrees, his gaze still lingering nervously upon the ring, as though the temptation already plants roots in his chest. Lastly, there are Sam, Merry, and Pippin, unwilling to rest until they too follow their friend. It feels accidental, almost reckless, yet it is precisely this mosaic of strength and weakness, courage and flaw, that makes the fellowship meaningful. And now you notice how extraordinary this moment truly is. Elves who have watched centuries unfold, dwarves who rarely share company, men burdened with ancient sins, and hobbits who have never left green gardens, all stepping together into history. The promise is fragile, and yet in its very fragility lies beauty. For what is braver than setting out with no certainty except that doom walks ahead? Theories circle this council like moths around a flame. Some say the Fellowship was doomed from its first breath, its members too scattered, its burden too heavy to hold unity. Others suggest that its true purpose was never success in the conventional sense, but the setting loose of ripples. Though broken at Amon Hen, though scattered to winds, the Fellowship's division allowed multiple victories simultaneously. Rohan stood, Gondor rallied, and Frodo pressed onward unseen. This is the paradox. Failure may serve a higher thread. What seem like collapses are part of a tapestry far larger than seen from one vantage. Consider for a moment the possibility that counsel and destiny both exist as mirrors of ourselves. If you were seated among them, would your first thought be trust or self-preservation? Would you cling to the ring's potential to shield those you love, or would you accept at once the deep terror written into its mere existence? The elves embody preservation, the dwarves obsession, men hunger for legacy, and the hobbits stand for loyalty and friendship. And perhaps the council's significance lies less in the final choice than in how all those traits are placed together, showing both the best and worst of Middle-earth in one circle. As your dreamlike steps continue, you glance out toward the balcony overlooking Rivendell's cascades. Mist rolls upward in a soft veil, drifting across the arched masonry, and you imagine that the elves' long memory sighs across those waters. They have hosted 100 councils before, watched countless alliances form and fail. Yet this council, this soft hobbit's decision, will ripple louder than any proud king's decree. Such is the gentle defiance of the tale. The mighty falter, the small endure. The shadows grow longer, the air cools, and torches are lit. The council disperses, debates subdued for now, wary glances exchanged but unspoken. You imagine walking slowly after them, the sounds of waterfalls blending with the first chords of night insects, and the knowledge that an impossible promise has been made. A fellowship of 9 will take the ring closer to its doom. Whether they realize it or not, none will return unchanged. And as your own eyes grow heavy, lulled by the river's voice and the gentle stone steps underfoot, you feel the weight of that moment settle inside you. The story moves forward always, ever onward, but tonight, on the edge of slumber, the decision of the council hovers gently, an ember glowing just enough to cast warmth into the growing dark. You walk away knowing that history has turned, and you, too, drift toward the next chapter of this long, soothing dream. You leave Rivendell's calm embrace, the waterfalls fading into memory, and step out into the clear chill of morning. The Fellowship has only just formed, and already the air feels charged with change. Their departure is quiet, almost understated. There are no fanfares, no armies marching in measured rhythm, only a handful of travelers walking into the winter woods. Yet the silence itself carries weight. Every boot pressed into snow, every breath rising like smoke is a witness to the fragile alliance newly built. At first, the road seems peaceful, a stretch of riverside paths and wooded glades. To you, the listener walker, it could almost be another dream of the Shire, trees with snow-laden branches, the crunch beneath feet soft as a lullaby. But then, from shadows behind the hills, the world reminds you that safety cannot last. Whispers pass along the icy breeze, riders, unseen yet felt. The scent of dread hovers as though the land itself shudders. You know already what glimmers in the darkness behind them. The Black Riders, the Nazgul, have begun their hunt once more. Though scattered momentarily, their nature is persistence. You remember now what you learned about the 9 rings and their slavery to the one. No matter how far the hobbits travel, they remain tethered to that pursuit. And as you walk alongside Frodo, who clutches the ring like a weight pressed into his pocket, you sense his anxiety rise with each winding of the trail. Evil is not always roaring metal and armies. Often, It rides in silence, in the creak of hooves on frozen ground, a sound that may or may not have been the wind. What makes the Nazgul so terrifying is not only their power, but their unnameable presence. They rarely strike in spectacle. Instead, they erode courage long before they attack. Even here, as you try to find warmth beneath your cloak, you imagine a cold stronger than winter coursing inward, the chill of despair itself seeping into marrow. Frodo feels it most. The closer the riders draw, the heavier his burden becomes. It is as if the ring itself pulses in recognition, reaching toward its masters even as he resists. Walking further, you begin to think about how Tolkien crafted these figures not merely as villains, but as archetypes of corruption. They are what happens when the gift of choice is utterly surrendered. No longer men, not quite wraiths, imprisoned between form and emptiness. They exist only as echoes of Sauron's will. This makes them both deeply tragic and deeply unsettling. Once, they were kings. Now they are shadows, stripped of name, memory, flesh. Their presence on the road transforms every wooded pass into a test of spirit. The Fellowship presses on, but even with Gandalf's guidance and Aragorn's steady resolve, unease grows. Night after night, small sounds stir the camp. A branch breaking in the wind, movement far off across river stones. Sam tries to keep cheer by speaking of gardens left behind. Pippin stirs the fire clumsily, but silence often overtakes them. It is silence filled with imagined hoofbeats. And perhaps you understand this, how dread rarely arrives all at once, but drizzles slowly into the edges of thought until normal moments taste faintly bitter. The threat of pursuit is not the only weight upon them. Geography itself is enemy, twisting against them with mountain passes blocked by snow, paths that vanish into jagged stone, rivers swollen with winter ice. To travel on foot, carrying not only swords and packs but the burden of the ring, is hardship beyond simple strength. The land itself seems designed to reveal weakness, and yet each day the Fellowship rises, drawn forward not by certainty, but because to stop is to surrender entirely. You pause in your steps to listen. High above, wind scours the peaks of the misty mountains. That is the road they attempt, for at first all think the way of Caradhras might hold safe passage. The path winds narrow and steep, snow bright enough to sting the eyes, and every loose rock tumbles downward into echoing ravines. There, the Fellowship fights through storm, Legolas moving lightly atop the snow while the hobbits sink nearly waist-deep, Boromir and Aragorn dragging them forward with immense effort. Hope freezes as swiftly as the air, and you consider that sometimes the natural world itself joins forces with destiny. Was this storm mere weather, or was Caradhras resisting them with malice as old as the mountain itself? As per the books, Tolkien describes the mountain with almost personality, as though the stone resented their passage. In the film adaptation, snow and storm feel like an elemental war against mortal flesh. Either way, the truth remains, the mountain denies them. What might have been a path northward crumbles into futility. And here lies a subtle turning point. Failures often guide the story more than victories. Without this rejection, there would be no Moria, no Balrog, no transformation of Gandalf. Even now, as the path grows more desperate and dark, the theory of choice lingers. Could another path have worked, or are all tracks funneled inevitably where fate requires? When Aragorn and Gandalf argue near the foot of the mountain, you glimpse two philosophies clashing, one for caution and preservation, the other for risk where no other path remains. And in this clash of voices, you sense the deeper truth. Even among the wise, there is no certainty. Decisions are made with only partial vision, while consequences echo beyond comprehension. Beneath all this, Frodo grows quieter, internally battling the whisper of his burden. Every step seems more laden, the ring brushing against his thoughts in hopes of bending him. Sauron is far, yet his servants are near enough to draw dread from marrow. You imagine yourself walking with him, shoulder brushing his as the ice crunches beneath. How could such a small figure bear so huge a weight? And yet the strange beauty of this tale is that the world is repeatedly saved by those no one else would have chosen. The Black Riders remain unseen but palpable. Sometimes Aragorn halts unexpectedly, listening with his hand upon the hilt of his blade. Even when nothing moves, silence itself feels like warning. You begin to notice how this lingering, invisible dread drains more strength than any battle might. War can be met openly. The shadow chips at the spirit in the unseen hour. You feel it, too, a dreamlike heaviness pressing softly as though urging you towards sleep. From afar, the idea emerges that this portion of the tale functions almost like a lull in the grand narrative. It carries dread, but dread without visible climax, a quiet burning. Theories abound that Tolkien wrote this as intentional contrast. The Shire's homely peace, the Council's high discourse, followed by this road of constant unease. A rhythm of narrative meant to prepare the reader, or in your case, the dreamer, for the furnace of events to come. Peace, then unease, then calamity, the swell of a tide drawing you deeper into its current. And isn't it soothing in its own way? To imagine a group of companions lit only by firelight, pressed against mountain storms, drawing on each other's warmth while shadows prowl just beyond sight. Though the danger is real, the camaraderie, the shared silence, the effort, the fire against the cold, becomes a rare comfort. You might almost nestle down in your own blanket now, mimicking them by the campfire, listening to Sam whisper another story of the Gaffer's sayings, Legolas humming softly in Elvish, Gimli pretending not to doze at all while his snores betray him. The sense of a small circle of warmth against an encroaching night is exactly what brings assurance amid repetition of danger. As you let these images settle in your mind, the truth softens. This shadow-haunted road is about more than fear. It is here the bonds of the fellowship begin to tighten. To walk together in peril is to realize the necessity of one another. Frodo may be bearer of the greatest burden, but each has already begun to carry the weight in their own way. And thus, though shadows lengthen ever behind, hope is not entirely absent. There is always the flame of companionship, as long as even one voice remains to remind you of warmth. So the road continues, beneath stars veiled by drifting clouds. You, too, press on, lulled by the rhythm of boots on snow, heart slowed by the pull of night's music. The pursuit of the Nazgul hovers always near, as if waiting just outside your dreams. Yet for now the story lets you rest on the road, suspended between peace and dread, until the next turn of fate carries you further inward. The path down from the frozen slopes of Caradhras feels like more than a retreat. It feels like surrendering to something older, darker, and determined. Snow still clings to the Fellowship's cloaks, their boots crunching through crusted drifts as they descend into the valley below. The mountain has refused them, its storm like an arm raised in warning, and now their choice is narrow. You can almost feel the weight of that narrowing, as though the land itself gently herds them into places no one willingly goes. Gandalf, leaning heavily on his staff, speaks of another passage, one hidden beneath the stone, carved long ago. And with that suggestion, shadows gather closer around the idea, for the word Moria is not whispered lightly. You walk with them as they near the cliffs where Dimrill Dale opens, and before you stretches a darkened wall of sheer rock. Somewhere within lies a door without latch or handle, a secret to those who do not know the tongue of elves and dwarves. The company halts at the mirrored lake beneath the wall, its waters shining eerily, reflecting starlight even where clouds cover the moon. The stillness is uncanny. The surface looks too smooth, as though guarding something restless beneath. You take a slow breath, finding yourself caught between awe at this ancient approach and unease at what lies beyond its threshold. It is here that you glimpse the door, pale lines etching themselves in faint light, drawn as if silver by unseen hand. The sigil of the House of Durin gleams beside elven stars, an unusual mingling, reminder that once, long ago, elves and dwarves carved side by side. Their friendship, though fragile and rare, here left lasting evidence. To look upon it now is to imagine voices in the dark, hammers ringing alongside elven song, the birth of a realm glittering under the mountain. For Moria was not always synonymous with terror. Once it was Khazad-dûm, the pride of dwarves, hall after hall stretching into eternity, columns vast as tree trunks, light glittering on mithril veined in stone. It was the heart of their craft, a citadel of resilience, a legend in its own right. Yet legends turn. That is the lesson the locked gate asks you to remember. For where there is craft, pride lies close, and where pride takes root, folly often follows. Long ago, in the throes of their mining, the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep. What they found was no load of treasure, but something from before memory, a terror sleeping within fire, boundless and ancient beyond reckoning. And so Khazad-dûm became Moria, black pit, forsaken under shadow, its halls emptied of song and filled with whispers. Doors shut, bridges broke, drums echoed in the depths. The beautiful city became a caution tale that even marvels cannot escape ruin if guarded only by desire. Still, necessity often pushes steps where no heart would wander, and necessity drives the fellowship now. Sauron's strength grows in the east. The mountains have denied them. Enemies stalk the surface. And so Gandalf sings the words of opening in many tongues, searching through languages ancient and obscure, until pointing out the simple irony that the password etched upon the gate meant speak, friend, and enter. A riddle so plain its trick lay in being overlooked. The stone parts, revealing black passage leading downward, and suddenly air moves again, but this time it is not of fresh night. It is musty, worn, stale with age. You feel it against your cheeks like the exhalation of centuries. Even here, before they step fully within, the point of no return is marked by dread. For in the waters behind, ripples spread wider than they should, and unseen shapes stir beneath. Dark fingers, tentacles, slither up from the surface, striking with monstrous purpose. Frodo is seized, pulled toward the Black Lake, panic erupting as steel flashes, forcing the creature to retreat. But the violence seals their fate. The Watcher in the water slams the doors shut behind them, stone closing inexorably, leaving no way back into starlight. From this moment on, the Fellowship has no choice but forward. Inside, the dark envelopes you. Your vision adjusts slowly, torches flare, and what light you see glints off vast halls. The company's footsteps echo endlessly into emptiness. Stone pillars as wide as tree trunks soar upward into hidden vaults, so immense they might truly be forests made mineral. Yet silence reigns. It is not the silence of peace, but of abandonment, too deep, too absolute. You feel the absence of voices where once markets hummed and forges sang. Yet not all is still. Whispers tell you that orcs rove the deeper tunnels, remnants of battle fought and unfought. The echo of drums sometimes trembles faintly, as if memory itself walked alongside you. Every shadow looks ready to stir. Here within stone lies an unease more suffocating than the storm atop Caradhras. Above, the danger was visible: snow, storms, wind. Down here, peril crouches unseen, waiting with patience. And then Gandalf leads them to the chamber of Mizarble, a resting place turned tomb. A broken book lies on stone, written in dwarvish hands, becoming more frantic page by page, recounting calamity, how they fought, how they fell, how Balin's hopeful attempt to reclaim Khazad-dûm ended in endless night. This discovery is not merely tragic, it is a forewarning. You almost shiver as you imagine the scribe's hand trembling, ink smudging, each line a cry into darkness. Even in death, the echoes of their despair remain, etched eternally. As per the books, Tolkien lingers here, describing how Balin's effort was noble yet fated. The film condenses. yet leaves you with one vivid haul and one sense of doom. The Fellowship has discovered they are not alone, and soon the danger pulls itself into the present in the rhythm of drums. Ominous beats that swell in your chest, growing louder, quicker, irresistible. Drums in the deep, the record warned, and now those drums roll again, closer and closer until even your own calm breathing feels in harmony with their dreadful rhythm. Theories sprout like moss in this darkness. Was Balin drawn by pride, by greed for Mithril, or by hope that light could once more bloom under Durin's crown? Were the orcs who claimed the halls mere squatters, or guided here at Sauron's subtle call to deny the dwarves hope forever? And deeper still, what truly is it to awaken a Balrog? Is such a creature flame alone, or is it will unquenched from the very dawn of time? The dwarves unearthed not just a beast but the embodiment of forgotten wars, commanding dread by its very existence. Step deeper into the thought. Moria is not simply a hazard the Fellowship passes on their journey. It is a microcosm of Middle-earth itself, a realm of beauty turned to ruin by flawed desire, haunted by forgotten sins, yet still echoing with treasures and memories worth mourning. Every hall whispers both grandeur and caution. Walking here, you stride between visions of what is possible, marvels forged by craft, and warnings of what inevitably follows when craft reaches greed's edge. Even in the dreamlike narration of night, a strange comfort lingers. To tell the story of Moria is to walk into shadow willingly, knowing well that your own bed, your own mind, lies far from danger. You imagine yourself as one of the Fellowship, torch in hand, boots sliding across dust untouched for centuries. Would you walk cautiously near Gandalf, trusting his memory of old maps? Would you press close to Aragorn's hand near his blade? Or would you drift towards Sam and the hobbits, hoping their unassuming courage softens your fear? In any case, you know you do not walk here alone, and that togetherness is what keeps the hall from devouring hope. And so you move forward still, footsteps echoing into the yawning depths, the council left far behind, the Shire impossibly distant, and everything plunged into shadow. The door has closed, the Watcher lingers in dark waters outside, and the drums whisper always ahead. Moria has clasped the Fellowship for its own. You, too, are clasped in. The story holds you gently, as much as the stone holds echoes. There is unease, but also a rhythm, a lull that carries you like a heartbeat deeper into this night. The deeper you wander into Moria, the more the air feels weighted with a presence, as though the very stone keeps watch. Your footsteps echo back upon themselves, magnified into a chorus that seems too large for so small a company. Torches flare against ancient pillars and cast long shadows that dart upward, stretching into cavernous darkness. Each step becomes a meditation on stillness, on history carved in silence. Yet all the while, behind that ominous calm, you sense there is something vast, unseen, lurking, and waiting. The Fellowship halts at times to rest, though even rest here feels uneasy. Sam's strokes bill the pony absent-mindedly, murmuring comforts, though Gandalf warns that the beast cannot travel much deeper. Gimli mutters reverently about how once these passages rang with laughter, song, and forge. To him, this is sacred ground, though tinged with despair now that Balin's fate has been discovered. While the hobbits huddle near the fire pit scraps, light catching their anxious expressions, Gandalf pores over the dwarves' scrolls, head bent low, brows furrowed in worry. He reads aloud snatches that trail into dismay. We cannot get out. They are coming. The uneasy air sharpens into immediacy the moment drums answer those words. First faint, then rhythmic, each beat reverberates against the stone. The echoes multiply as though armies march unseen within distant caverns. You feel it in your ribs as much as you hear it, an inescapable pounding like the heart of Moria itself stirring awake. The Fellowship steels themselves as clamor builds. Orc cries rise in shrill menace, arrows clanging against shields, steel wailing. The company springs into a circle of defense. The assault in the chamber of Mizarble is swift and vicious. Orcs press forward, armor clattering. Grotesque, faces lit briefly in torch flare. Arrows zip through the air, striking shields and stone. Legolas sends shafts back with lethal precision. Gimli thrashes his foes with axe strokes born of fury for his kin. Boromir and Aragorn fight shoulder to shoulder, steel sweeping arcs that cut through waves of black. Even the hobbits muster courage. Knives flash awkward but earnest, and Sam, in particular, charges to Frodo's defense with a desperation that nearly sweeps him into danger. The fight might have dragged on endlessly if not for silence, an unnatural silence that expands in abrupt command. Orc ranks falter, eyes widening not in triumph, but in sudden terror. Then, faint at first but dreadful in progression, begins another rhythm, heavier, slower, deeper than drums of orcs. It is the sound of something enormous moving, each footfall like a world collapsing. The orcs scatter, abandoning prey mid-battle, fleeing before a fear greater than the Fellowship's blades. This is when you, too, feel the shift. The air grows hotter, torches sputter as though gasping. The shadows no longer require flame to animate them. They dance with their own fire. A low roar ripples faintly, more vibration than sound, carrying with it the impression of fury boundless and old. Gandalf's voice hardens, commanding retreat. His words crack through the panic. There is something coming, something I have feared. The company runs through halls wide as valleys, across stairways crumbling with age, down corridors slick with dust. Each echoing footfall joins your heartbeat, a rhythm of pursuit. And behind, closer, louder, comes the fire. Walls glow faintly, as though veins of molten or pulse inside stone. You risk a glance back, flames swelling in arches, darkness outlined by sudden firelight. And there, the creature revealed in fragments, a silhouette immense, wings like shadow folds, whips snapping sparks, a body of fire cloaked in darkness. The Balrog. Its name is whispered with reverence and dread in elvish tales, tying it to a time long before the shaping of the world when beings of fire and might rebelled with Morgoth, the first Dark Lord. To glimpse it now is to glimpse not merely a monster but a fragment of primordial rebellion, a being whose existence resists ages of peace. The dwarves, delving deep, had awakened this relic of catastrophe, and Khazad-dûm never recovered from that trespass. What you feel now is not just fear of fire, but awe, the faint reverberation of myth itself pressing upon the present. The Fellowship reaches the bridge of Khazad-dûm, its narrow length spanning a chasm that falls beyond sight. The drop swallows torchlight utterly. Even your imagination cannot find a bottom. The air swirls with updraft, pulled toward the abyss as though hungry. Across this fragile spine of stone lies their salvation, the exit leading into Dimril Dale. But the danger blocks pursuit with relentless inevitability. The Balrog strides closer, fire brightening like a dawn of death. The company presses across while Gandalf remains planted at the center of the bridge. The others hesitate, but obey. Gandalf raises his staff, his sword gleaming white against the inferno. His silhouette is small compared to the Balrog, yet it radiates a defiance that sears deeper than fire. This is confrontation in its most distilled form. Light against shadow, mortal frame against primordial ruin. As the Balrog steps upon the bridge, Gandalf strikes his staff hard to the ground. Sparks crown him, and his old voice roars words that vibrate through marrow, a forbid dance, a claim that darkness may not pass. And though we refrain from quoting, the tone is unmistakable, a barrier of will at the edge of despair. The whip lashes, sparks spray, the clash shudders through stone. The narrow bridge cracks beneath their struggle, fragments tumbling into the void. Then, a final heave, Gandalf drives his sword into the stone at his feet, unleashing brilliance so bright it blinds with its suddenness. The bridge fractures under the Balrog's weight, stone explodes outward, abyss yawns wider, and the creature plunges, roaring, its fire trailing like a falling star into endless dark. Relief surges, yet it is brief. The whip cracks upward one last time, curling around Gandalf's legs as he staggers. For an instant he releases his sword, grasping stone desperately, but his eyes lift toward the Fellowship instead of the abyss. His final command rings clear, "Flee." And then, before anyone can reach him, Gandalf is yanked downward, vanishing into shadow after the beast he cast down. His cry lingers, echoes echo endlessly across the cavern, until only silence remains. You can almost hear Frodo scream out, his small voice echoing across the devastated bridge. Aragorn seizes him, dragging him towards safety, his own face hardened with grief masked as command. Boromir pushes the hobbits on, Gimli bellows fury and sorrow, Legolas grips tightly to his bow with trembling hand. Together they flee into daylight at the opposite end of the passage, but grief strides beside them, heavier than any enemy yet faced. As per the books, Tolkien lingers longer on this moment, granting Gandalf's fall the tone of legend, mourned with songs and laments in Lothlorien. The film condenses into visceral shock, a cliffhanger of visual despair. Either way, his absence leaves behind emptiness as potent as the Balrog's roar. Leadership torn, wisdom silenced, the most essential anchor of the company ripped into shadow. Theories bloom around this fall with fervor. Was Gandalf always meant to confront the Balrog, fulfilling destiny by passing beyond death to return as the White? Was the mountain storm earlier, which forced Moria upon them, orchestrated by Providence itself to ensure his transformation? Or was the fall merely the consequence of flawed choice, mistake transfigured into moment of cosmic correction? These whispers remind you again that in Tolkien's world, fate and free will dance in indistinguishable harmony. For you, walking faintly alongside, the moment seats itself deeper. The fall of Gandalf isn't just loss. It is transformation of the Fellowship. From this moment on, they walk leaderless, carrying grief as weight but also courage as inheritance. The hush along their escape path into Dimrill Dale is more than exhaustion. It is the silence of devastation. Yet this devastation, paradoxically, steels them for what comes. And you, in your slow dream drifting under blankets, begin to soften into the rhythm of that grief. There's something oddly soothing about traveling alongside despair when you know its purpose in the legend. You let tears hang unshed, as the hobbits do, but you also begin to understand. Even loss is woven into salvation. Even fire may transfigure rather than only destroy. For now the Fellowship continues without its guide, burden doubled but resolve quietly tempered. The shadows of Moria recede behind. The sky of Dimrill Dale, not yet comforting, yet brighter than the abyss. Gandalf's fall lingers in memory as both wound and ember, keeping the story burning into the night, through the rhythm of your pulse, as softly as the tale itself holds you, preparing you for sleep. The arrival into Lothlorien comes not as dramatic thunder, nor as crushing battle, but as a quiet softening, a counterpoint to the despair just endured in Moria. You step out from the harsh, unforgiving stone of caverns and into a different world entirely, one painted with color more delicate, light more eternal, branches bending overhead like cathedral arches spun of living wood. Dimrill Dale fades behind, and suddenly you find yourself wandering into timelessness. The air here is sweet, touched with pollen carrying the fragrance of flowers that bloom, strangely, even in the breath of winter. It drifts against your face, cool and strangely eternal, as though Lothlorien obeys its own measure of time, detached from the world of grief and loss. Your steps are tentative, cautious, still raw from Gandalf's fall. Frodo's eyes cast down more often than forward. Sam remains unusually quiet. Gimli clenches his fists around his axe, not out of fury this time, but restraint. The entire company carries silence like a funeral cloak. Yet as you pass under the branches, woven pathways ascend up silver tree trunks into swaying platforms bejeweled with lantern light. It is breathtaking, so unlike Rohan's rugged ridges or Gundor's rising stone. Here the architecture seems not made by hand but grown in harmony, as though elves themselves are gardeners of eternity. The elves of Lórien meet the fellowship with wary grace. Halder and his company, tall and fair, descend along the boughs, their bows taut, their eyes suspicious. No one passes into their sanctuary without scrutiny. But when the truth is told, and the grief for Mithrandir shared, suspicion softens into reluctant understanding. Frodo, as ring-bearer, earns special attention, though what they see in him you cannot fully guess. Perhaps the ring glimmers faintly even to their gaze, and its danger is known without words. And then Galadriel. You follow the fellowship into the heart of Kara's Galadhon, where her presence draws stillness from all, like a moon lifting itself from the horizon. Tall, seen through a halo of silver-gold hair, her beauty resists description, yet more profound than her visage is the atmosphere she weaves. Cool, unwavering calm mixed with something piercing. If Lothlórien itself feels outside of time, Galadriel is the embodiment of that timelessness. Even Gimli, stubborn in his dwarf pride, feels undone in her presence, though he cannot voice why. Galadriel welcomes them with words both gentle and searching. Her eyes linger on Frodo, senses probing inward, and you realize that here the ring offers no deception. She knows what it is, she knows what it does, and she knows what burden rests on shoulders small but resolute. Around her, the air thrums with awareness, as though even the leaves bend toward her to listen. And here, the first theory slips softly into the current like fish stirring streams. Would Galadriel, great among the elves, have resisted the ring if it were offered to her? The question is not mere curiosity. It becomes reality when Galadriel confronts it herself. Frodo, caught between reverence and desperation, offers the ring to her openly, perhaps hoping to be rid of its weight. Time seems to hold its breath. You can almost hear the wind cease, the lantern still. Her voice rises, a vision swelling of her potential should she claim it. Terrible queen robed in starlight, worshipped and feared, beauty deadly. Light turned irresistible tyranny. For one suspenseful heartbeat, you expect her to stretch out her hand. Instead, she steps back, laughter trembling, voice softening with enormous release. She has passed the test. Her humility is more luminous than any hypothetical grandeur. Where she could have ruled unchallenged, she instead chooses diminishment, exile, and the slow fading of her people's age. This choice is not dramatic in action, but it fractures history in a quieter, more permanent way. Here, light proves itself strongest not by domination, but renunciation. As per the books, Tolkien lingers on this scene as a turning point not just for Galadriel, but for elvenkind. Acceptance that the time of men must come, and their role is to guide rather than cling. The films, too, preserve the poignant vision of monstrous magnificence, contrasting it with her return to serenity. Both forms whisper the same truth, that real strength is not seizing possibility, but resisting it. The company, nourished not merely by food and drink, but by hope reborn, lingers in this sanctuary. They heal wounds of the body with elvish remedies. They mend grief with whispers, with song floating across the air like feathers drifting down a moonlit river. For perhaps the most soothing moment in the whole tale, they simply exist without pursuit. The orcs are far, the black riders absent, the rings whisper muffled. If Moria was dread embodied in echo, Lórien is reprieve embodied in harmony. You glide with them through this time, feeling the rhythm of the elves who sleep little, who seem to stand guard even in their dreams, who sing of stars older than any mortal language. Waterfalls cascade softly, golden leaves glow even in darkness, and the sense of being in an interlude, outside history's relentless river, embraces you. Yet the interlude cannot last forever. It is here, however, that Tolkien the author himself seems most transparent. His wartime years, his grief for a world disappearing beneath industrialization, echo faintly in realms like Lórien. This golden wood, untainted, seems modeled upon the England of his boyhood, fields and wildflowers preserved in memory. Scholars often wonder whether Lórien embodies his ache for permanence, for a corner of beauty untouched by war or greed. And though Tolkien insisted he resisted allegory, here nostalgia bleeds so richly as metaphor you cannot unsee it. Theories abound, woven into strands of this golden respite. Was Galadriel's refusal of the ring a proof that the elves could never have been trusted to carry it? Or was her strength singular, rare even among her kind? Did Frodo's willingness to offer it hint already at his subconscious wish to unburden himself, even so early in the journey? And in the languid timelessness of Lórien, always subtle, arises the dual-edged sword of preservation. Beauty that refuses to wither may soothe, but also it denies change, denies growth. When at last the fellowship departs, you sense the bittersweetness. They leave a garden of dream, but one that cannot remain untouched forever. There are gifts here before they go. Cloaks woven of elven thread that nearly blend into wood and stone. Limbas bread, simple yet enduring, compact enough to sustain long marches. Galadriel herself offers each a boon. Gimli receives a strand of hair, a gift he treasures beyond jewels greater than gold. Sam is given a box of earth from her garden, a promise to make even the Shire bloom anew someday. Frodo receives the light of Arundel's star, the very essence of hope bound in a crystal phial, when all other lights go out. These gifts are not mere trinkets. They are future lifelines, secrets folded into time, woven forward into salvation. You linger now upon Galadriel's mirror, the water basin into which she bids Frodo gaze. It does not reflect merely what is, but what was, or what may yet be, or things too distant to fathom. Frodo glimpses the eye of Sauron, fiery, seeking, endless. Sam looks and sees the Shire ravaged by industry, forests leveled, mills belching smoke, his beloved home under torment. This is perhaps the cruelest and truest thing about visions. They show possibility without clarity, threat without assurance. And here, Tolkien stitches another truth of life. The future is frightening because it comes in fragments, warnings without certainty. Yet still, the heart of Lórien rests not in fear of visions, but in the delicate quiet, in the long pause before the storm. Here, the Fellowship remembers not merely why they walk, but what they have left behind. And you, nestled in your drifting imagination now, imagine yourself reclining against a tree trunk, listening to ethereal elvish song filtering through leaves, lulled as stars wheel overhead. It feels like eternity in miniature, a night both still and infinite, giving you momentary reprieve from tension. And when dawn comes, the Fellowship steps into boats, gliding down the great river Anduin. Water laps gently against carved sides, and golden leaves land upon their shoulders, Galadriel and Celeborn fading into distance upon the banks. Departure carries sorrow, for they know they leave behind a pocket of sanctuary never again to be found. Yet their burdens are lighter for this pause, grief softened, courage restored. For you also, as you lie safe beneath your own roof, this gentle sojourn allows ease. To imagine walking under golden trees so calm they hush grief itself is to feel, for a moment, that the world can offer corners untouched by shadow. That, perhaps, is Galadriel's true gift, not hair or file, not cloaks or soil, but restoration of spirit enough to step once more into darkness. And as the river carries them, it carries you, softly onward into the next movement of the tale. The river carries the Fellowship far from the golden hush of Lothlórien and into territory that no longer feels timeless, but instead raw, uncertain, and pressing. The waters whisper around the boats, steady and gentle, yet there is a sense that each bend forward is also a stripping away of safety. What once felt like a company led by Mithrandir and sheltered by Galadriel has now become a group adrift, more vulnerable, more fragile, and more inescapably aware of the choice that lies ahead. Ahead, of course, they know, looms the darkness of Mordor. But in this moment, you drift with them on the river, every ripple a quiet heartbeat beneath the uncertainty that begins to split the fellowship. The Anduin stretches wide, bordered by forests that shift slowly from gold into rougher greens, and eventually into stark and rocky expanses. Sometimes the land narrows, pressing them into shadows that loom from cliffs, and sometimes it opens into broad water, so wide you could almost mistake it for the sea. Rowing in silence, you notice how each member holds themselves differently now. Aragorn watches the riverbanks with vigilance, his thoughts already bending toward decisions of leadership in the absence of Gandalf. Legolas gazes up to the heavens more often than forward, eyes far away beyond the horizon. Gimli grumbles quietly, though his hands never leave the haft of his axe. The hobbits, dear and small, curl in the boats with drowsiness, though whispers of fear mingle even with their moments of weary laughter. At night, they camp along the sandy riverbanks, fires kept small, voices hushed. Boromir's presence becomes louder here, not louder in tone perhaps, but louder in insistence. Always his gaze lingers upon Frodo. Whenever talk strays to what must happen in Mordor, to how the ring is to be destroyed, his speeches rise again. Why plunge into the very mouth of shadow, he wonders, when a weapon is in their hands that could be wielded against it? Why march to destruction when salvation could be grasped? If only Frodo were less stubbornly bound to Gandalf's command. In his voice is no mockery or self-serving villainy. No, Boromir speaks with conviction born of desperation. You see Minas Tirith through his eyes, its white towers gleaming even while surrounded by the Blackland's encroachment. He speaks of the city's walls, mighty but strained, of the proud line of men now teetering, of a people who will fall unless some impossible strength restores them. His words are rings of logic, but beneath logic lies temptation. For the ring does not whisper loudly, it slips softly beneath noble thought, twisting resolve into corruption a shade at a time. Frodo feels the pressure mounting. His hands often stray toward the small chain upon his chest, as though to reassure himself that the ring remains hidden. But sleep comes to him unevenly now, dreams troubled, weight pressing deeper each day. Even the care of Sam feels, at moments, like too little balm against that steadily mounting terror that every companion is watching, each perhaps coveting. What began as a bond of united purpose grows thinner, weaker, like fabric fraying beneath strain. The breaking of the fellowship approaches, not as sudden calamity, but as steady cracks building across stone. One day's river journey brings them to the figures of Argonath, the mighty stone guardians of Númenórean craft. High upon the cliffs, their carved forms rise impossibly enormous, kings frozen in eternal vigilance, arms outstretched in warning. To pass beneath them is to feel dwarfed, to recognize tangibly that ancient men had ambition far beyond simple survival. The hobbits stare upward in awe. Sam nearly topples from the boat, trying to see the crowns. And Aragorn, too, silent and solemn, gazes upward with something flickering in his eyes, genealogy, memory, destiny tugging at him, though he has tried so long to evade it. For though the kings carve, there are only stone husks, shadows of grandeur long past. Aragorn is one of their rightful heirs. One day he might be more than ranger. One day he may rise to the throne those statues symbolize. Here, again, fate and free will entwine. But the river cannot carry them forever. Soon enough, they reach the banks beneath Amon Hen, a wooded hill scarred with ruins, and decide this must be the place where choices are clarified. Should they turn east at last, marching directly into Mordor's black gates? Or should they continue south, first to Gondor, perhaps lending aid to Minas Tirith, or seeking shelter in the White City before plunging further into shadow? Gandalf is gone, and with his passing so goes the certainty of leadership. Now choices lie heavy upon Aragorn's shoulders, though Frodo alone bears the true burden none can share. It is here that Boromir pulls Frodo aside, his voice rising, his arguments sharpening. His desperation bursts finally from theory into action. You feel his inner battle as keenly as Frodo does. He is not cruel, not greedy in the vulgar sense, but he is utterly convinced that to not wield the ring is folly. He presses Frodo, voice pleading before it becomes demanding, and then, in horror, he lunges. For a breathless moment, Boromir is no longer himself. His hands claw toward the chain around Frodo's neck. The ring asserts itself viciously upon his weakness. Frodo, terrified, slips the ring onto his finger, vanishing from Boromir's grasp. Invisibility saves him, but also plunges him into the chasm of Sauron's vision. With the ring on, the eye blazes across his mind. Fire, malice, hunger centering instantly upon him. He tears it free but trembles wild-eyed, despairing. He understands then with absolute certainty. The Fellowship cannot endure this temptation. He must go alone. It is not anger that drives him away, but fear, that even friends will crack beneath the ring's pressure. Boromir collapses into sobbing remorse almost as soon as Frodo flees. He wanders bewildered, as though awakening from dark intoxication, understanding too late what has already shattered. The Fellowship splinters, not by orcs or destiny at first, but by flaw, by desire, by weakness. Not with thunder, but with one man's fallibility. Meanwhile, other members search desperately for Frodo, Sam stumbling through brush, frantic, Merry and Pippin confused but determined. Aragorn senses the fracture more keenly than any. And then calamity folds doubly upon itself. Orcs descend, Uruk-hai bred and Isengard stampeding upon them in wave after wave. The clash shatters across the woods, cries ringing. Merry and Pippin are seized. Boromir attempts to defend them, and pays with his life, pierced by arrows too many to count. He fights until breath will no longer stay, collapsing yet clutching sword to keep them safe. His final breaths are confession to Aragorn, not simply of weakness, but of loyalty at last, begging him to save Minas Tirith in his stead. His redemption lies in sacrifice. And so the Fellowship is broken. Frodo resolves to continue alone, though Sam, loyal beyond any command, refuses to let him go without. Merry and Pippin are dragged into captivity, their story already bending toward Fangorn. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli find themselves bound together now by Boromir's death and the oath to chase the captors. What began as one company united at Rivendell splinters into many paths, not a disintegration, but a scattering. And this scattering, paradoxically, becomes the movement that makes victory possible at all. As per the books, Tolkien traces this breaking with somber weight, fracturing the narrative yet binding it with parallel tension across separate threads. The film, too, captures its grief-laden grandeur, the arrow-filled body of Boromir, Frodo and Sam rowing across the current, Aragorn's promise whispered like bond. In every telling, what resonates most is not battle but fragmentation. Heroes cannot walk all paths together. They must divide, each to their fate, each to the role threads of history demand. Theories ripple even here like eddies along the riverbank. Was the Fellowship always meant to break from the start? Or might Gandalf, if alive, have prevented Boromir's collapse, steered them toward a different cohesion? Some whisper that Providence itself required this sundering, the scattering allowing more seeds to sprout resistance, ensuring war is fought on many fronts. The breaking of the Fellowship, painful though it is, might be less failure than catalyst. For Aragorn cannot ascend without first stepping into Gondor alone. Frodo cannot persevere if not stripped of shields. And Boromir himself cannot redeem unless tested to final breaking. Now, as you drift in this dreamlike retelling, you too feel the bittersweet nature of endings. The Fellowship began with 9 walking together out of Rivendell's gates. Now, each member walks a different road. Yet it is this splintering that gives the tale its richness, its mosaic of fate. A company always together would be stronger in the moment, but weaker in the long ripple of legend. The river flows still in your imagination, carrying Frodo and Sam into eastward dusk, their silhouettes shrinking as they vanish from sight. You hear Aragorn's low voice dedicating paths forward, Gimli's grieved muttering, Legolas's quiet sorrow. And in your own drowsy heart, perhaps you also hear the creak of oars, the whisper of water, and you feel not merely grief for fellowship undone, but wonder at the strange beauty of stories that fracture in order to endure. Out of breaking comes renewal. Out of sadness comes resolve. So close your eyes softly now and picture that wide river once more, its ripples glinting with falling sun, the boats scattering in different currents, all drifting toward vast destinies. While you rock gently in your own bed, carried softly by this endless flow of tale and sleep. The fellowship no longer exists in one body, but in several bands scattered to the winds, each carrying with them the weight of what was lost and the uncertainty of what lies ahead. Where once they rode together down the Anduin, now you drift apart with them. One path sees Frodo and Sam trudging, unresolved but resolute, into the east alone. Another follows to the plains and ridges of Rohan, where Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli chase death and destiny. And still another trails after Merry and Pippin, hauled roughly by Uruk-hai captors through forests that do not sleep lightly beneath their boots. What was unity transforms now into strands of parallel journeys, each fraught, and each carrying its part of the greater story forward. We linger for a moment with Frodo and Sam, perhaps the most fragile-seeming pair to carry such impossible weight. Their boat, once skimming along the Anduin's curves, is left behind in reeds. They walk now on rough paths, their provisions heavy but their courage the heavier. Sam speaks often, sometimes to soothe Frodo, sometimes simply to fill silence, as though words themselves can guard against encroaching dread. He imagines meals he cannot make, gardens he cannot tend, and prattles of potatoes until even Frodo laughs shakily, caught between wonder at his friend's faithfulness and despair beneath the ring. The burden grows darker with each passing day. While Sam notices only that Frodo seems paler, wearier, Frodo himself feels the ring pressing into the tender edges of his will. Its whispers are subtle, power, pity, promises half-believed, but its weight against his neck is not. The chain bites, the object drags. Mordor seems to call to it with each step they make. And yet with Sam by his side, the isolation feels just almost bearable. You, walking with them, sense that this companionship, stripped down to two who refuse to let go of one another, is the quiet heart that will carry furthest of all. Elsewhere, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli hurtle forward in another kind of struggle. The last sight of Merry and Pippin being dragged screaming into the woods burns in their memory. Now they chase with furious relentlessness, running across the fields of Rohan, their boots pounding hours into days. Gimli pants, grumbles, yet never slows. Legolas runs as though tireless, his feet brushing grass rather than pressing it. Aragorn sets the pace, eyes locked to the ground, reading signs in bent grass, footprints, and faint spatterings of blood. Here is the ranger at his truest, senses attuned to the earth itself. For him, the chase is more than duty. It is redemption for Boromir, for failure to protect. Across these plains of Rohan, history herself rustles. The land is vast, wind-carved, riddled with scattered villages and horse herds. You can hear, woven faintly into the wind, the pounding echo of hooves. These are the Rittermark, where the Rohirrim ride, descendants of horse lords whose lineage lies not in stone citadels, but in fields, in motion, in breath of steeds. The three hunters know they pursue not merely orc foes, but in some ways the thread of destiny that will tangle them with this people. What begins as chase will open into alliance, and what opens as grief will bend into kingship. Shift again, and we find Merry and Pippin themselves, seized by the Uruk-hai. The march is brutal. They are bound, gagged at times, tossed like cargo over shoulders when they stumble. The ground flies past beneath them, their sense of time reduced to pain, fear, and exhaustion. Yet even here glimmers defiance. The hobbits find small moments to whisper to each other, to cut knots with sharp stones, to mislead their captors by dropping traces behind them. Their cleverness, unlikely as it may seem, threads them toward freedom, and their captivity draws them precisely to the place their presence will matter most. And so, in these diverging lines, you see how Tolkien structures this middle passage. The tale fractures, but not to weaken. Rather, it multiplies possibility. Here in the scattering, the threads of fate begin to intertwine with new peoples, new histories, new tragedies and triumphs. Unity at Rivendell was needed to forge resolve, but separation is what allows seeds to be planted across all of Middle-earth. As per the books, this dividing moment is painstakingly detailed. Tolkien lets momentum scatter with care. One chapter follows Frodo, the next the hunters, another the hobbits, and the reader realizes that all directions matter equally. The film, meanwhile, organizes for clarity, staggering events for cinematic flow. Yet despite such differences, the core tone aligns. This is the story of a world where chance encounters and fragmented decisions ripple into great tides. The theory lightly touched here is that Providence itself, something greater, willed the Fellowship's disbanding. One might imagine that if all had marched east to Mordor together, they would have attracted not only orcs but armies, overwhelmed utterly long before reaching its gates. By scattering, Sauron's eye is divided, his mind consumed by Gondor, Rohan, Isengard, leaving two small hobbits to slip through unseen. In their breaking lay precisely the strategy that would triumph. What looks like ruin at Amon Hen may have been the only path to victory. Still, for those within the story, this is not yet visible. Frodo feels isolation sharp as a blade. Aragorn feels failure like ash. Sam feels scraping fear, yet clings fiercely to loyalty. Merry and Pippin feel helplessness while discovering flashes of bravery in themselves. Each walks, or is carried forward bearing only partial knowledge of what the whole requires of them. And perhaps, listener dreamer, this is Tolkien's truest echo of our own lives. We rarely see more than a piece of the larger weave. Our choices matter despite this, or rather, because of it. Imagine for a moment Aragorn pausing on Rohan's ridges as the moon sets, scanning the horizon where endless fields vanish in a shadow. Imagine Frodo halting in a cleft of rock with Sam asleep beside him, his fingers trembling upon the ring as though caught between discarding it and wearing it. Picture Pippin whispering to Merry under their guards' ears, devising schemes despite exhaustion. These scattered images, the lonely leader, the burdened friend, the captive dreamer, each hold more weight than any one sword stroke might. Walking with them, you realize this turning is less about immediate peril than about identity itself. The Fellowship was safe in numbers. Their stories now demand individuality. Aragorn must begin stepping into his kingship. Frodo must begin accepting he will always walk under burden. Sam must claim his ancestral loyalty as strength. Merry and Pippin must become more than comic relief. They must become sparks lighting an ancient forest. And Legolas, Gimli, too, begin to knit bonds of friendship that defy long histories of hostility. Out of breaking comes reforging. Out of scattering comes building. And so your dreamlike stride slows, softened by the rhythm of multiple journeys. You are no longer following one road, but many, as though drifting across strands of music that interlace into harmony. The breaking of the Fellowship, sorrowful though it is, offers a comforting insight when looked upon gently. It is not an end, but a flowering. When nine can no longer walk together, nine can still shape the world apart. Somewhere in the east, Mordor waits, shrouded in ash. Somewhere in the south, Saruman's forges belch smoke. Somewhere on open plains, horsemen gather, songs ancient as their steeds. And here you follow each thread, letting them whisper beneath your closed eyelids as you edge downward into rest. The story churns always forward. Frodo's footsteps crunch over stone. Aragorn's chase pounds across ridges. The hobbits are hauled through tangled woodlands. The song of Middle-earth grows layered, not diminished, by the scattering. And you, resting, listening, recognize this as soothing paradox. That breaking is not destruction, but the very means by which endurance takes root. The plains of Rohan lay wide before you, rolling with grass the color of pale wheat beneath the dim skies of waning winter. Here, the three hunters, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, race tirelessly. It is a strange image, the three of them together. The long-legged pace of Aragorn eating distance mile by mile, Legolas gliding across the earth almost as though weightless, and Gimli thundering behind with axe at his side, short but unyielding. Their chase across the Rittermark is not simply a pursuit of captors, but a test of will. Each hour driven by grief, by Boromir's death, by Merry and Pippin's abduction, presses them harder than the sun overhead. Days blur. Aragorn bends to the ground often, tracing prints with keen eyes, reading every bent blade of grass as though written in plain ink. He names the direction, the tiredness of the captors, the hobbits' occasional resistance, and you realize how remarkable it is, this ranger's gift of communion with the land. While Legolas' arrows and Gimli's axe make clear strengths, Aragorn's is quieter. Interpretation, patience, sight beyond what is apparent. And he leads them forward like a hound locked to scent. As they press on, the first shadow of Rohan's politics appears. The land they cross is not unclaimed. Horsemen roam, guardians of wide plains and herds. Though Aragorn intends rescue, his troop is seen as outsiders, uncertain, perhaps even spies. You arrive with them when the company of Eomer sweeps toward them, 100 riders encircling like a tide of wind and steel. This is your first taste of Rohan's strength. The horse lords, proud and suspicious alike, warriors who know every variation of sky and field, their loyalty bound to their people rather than abstract crowns. Eomer himself embodies this tension, fierce and clear-eyed, devoted to defending Rohan's borders, yet weary of deceit. He greets Aragorn with suspicion laced with generosity. When Aragorn reveals his heritage, though not yet boldly claiming it, Eomer perceives enough nobility to grant aid. Here lies a moment worth savoring, the slow forging of trust between men who would one day stand shield to shield at Pelennor. Aragorn chooses words not of demand, but of camaraderie, reminding Eomer that ties are forged in belief, not command. You sense this trust will blossom later, but for now, it represents the first flickering alliance. Yet the hobbits are not found among Eomer's men. The riders, it appears, had slain many orcs in their own skirmish, burning the carcasses upon flame, saying nothing of captives left alive. Aragorn's despair hardens, but hope remains as he traces again hobbit prints running into Fangorn on freed feet. Thus the hunter's chase shifts into woodlands deeper, older, stranger than the plains could ever show. And elsewhere, Frodo and Sam continue east. Without Gandalf, without Aragorn's lead, they stumble guided only by instinct, shadows of Mordor already pressing at their path. Their steps bring them into confrontation with Gollum, who finally reveals himself more fully here as pursuer and reluctant guide. Ambiguity follows him like a stench. He is desperately pitiable, the ring's poison etched into his very body, yet his thin cunning is undeniable. Frodo chooses the unlikeliest of partnerships, binding the creature to them with promise, trusting him for necessity, though dread fills every glance over shoulder. Sam despises him openly, stamping suspicion into every word. Yet even Sam can see the wretchedness in his form, a being split upon itself constantly, at war in every breath. This juxtaposition of paths is deliberate. In one land, riders of horses pursue orcs, trust and honor tangled in questions of allegiance. In another, Two hobbits traverse rock and marsh bound to a trader guide. Tolkien fractures the tale not to distract but to layer, to remind you that struggles of grand armies and struggles of one bare foot against stone carry equal weight in the weave. Each path matters. Each figure bears a piece of the same burden. But it is not merely plains and chases to occupy the story. Soon, the great storm of Helm's Deep builds. The Ents have yet to rise. Gondor has yet to call. Mordor has yet to march openly. Still, the first great clash of this volume arrives at the ancient fortress carved into Rohin's White Mountains. You stand with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli as they arrive with Eomer at Edoras, the hilltop hall of gold-roofed Meduseld. Inside the smoky chamber, you see Theoden, king of Rohin, diminished. His posture slumps, his hair thinned, his face aged unnaturally. Beside him coils Grima Wormtongue, pale, oily, whispering decay into his ear. Saruman's influence has worked its poison well, through words rather than war, through snake-like counsel rather than swords. But not for much longer. For Gandalf returns here, revealed anew not as gray, but as white, his presence blazing through gloom. His entry is thunderous in its simplicity, staff striking, voice commanding, Wormtongue cast trembling into shadows. Theoden rises, shoulders straightening, youth shimmering faintly back into his eyes. Rohin regains its king in an instant, its spirit sparked anew. If Gandalf's fallen Moria was despair's nadir, his reappearance in Rohin is hope flaring again. And yet Saruman's armies are already gathering. Across Isengard, forges rumble ceaseless, birthing the Uruk-hai bred cruelly for war. Trees fall endlessly, smoke blackens the horizon. His betrayal is no longer whispered but thunderously declared, and the armies sweep upon Rohin with speed none had foreseen. Theoden commands the evacuation of his people to Helm's Deep, the ancient fortress with walls carved of mountain stone, where they may endure siege if nothing else. Here, within this migration of a nation, you feel tension mounting beyond any prior passage. Families flee with carts, children cling to parents, warriors gird weapons beside them. It is not merely an army defending. It is a people striving to exist at all. This is why war in Tolkien's telling never feels like numbers, but always like stories. Each man standing upon Helm's Deep's wall carries with him family, lineage, laughter, fear. And each swing of sword represents the possibility not only of death, but of erasure from history itself. As per the books, the defense of Helm's Deep is described almost communally. Humans, elves, if only in film, and Aragorn's leadership intertwined with Theoden's. The film dramatizes with gleaming sequences of rain-slicked stone, cascading ladders, and fire-thundering culverts. Both renderings capture one truth. This is the battle where hope feels least plausible, but where courage is revealed clearest because of it. Imagine the rain streaming down as the orc army arrives, a black tide beneath torchlight, thousands pressing against the fortress walls. The men of Rohin clutch their spears, hands trembling though resolve stiffens. Upon the wall, Aragorn moves among them, giving strength not through false promise but through presence, embodiment of steadiness itself. Gimli and Legolas banter and count, yet beneath their rivalry is camaraderie, their friendship hard-forged in pursuit, now made steel under storm. And Theoden himself, shaking off Long Shadow, declares willingness to stand, even if it means dying as king defending his people. Theories whispered about Helm's Deep often explore Saruman's purpose. Did he genuinely believe his army could erase Rohin utterly? Or was he playing merely the first hand of Sauron's greater game, meant to destroy hope in men, to eliminate aid Gondor might later desperately need? Some also suggest the deeper intent. Saruman's attack was as much symbolic as strategic, felling horse lords who epitomized freedom and mobility in Middle-earth, thereby striking at the psychology of resistance itself. Yet Helm's Deep does not fall. Against expectation, dawn comes. One can almost see that first blade of sunlight break across mountains as Gandalf arrives with Eomer and riders, charging down upon the retreating orc horde. Where despair seemed eternal, sudden salvation breaks like morning itself. The fortress holds, Rohan breathes again. Hope, for now, lives. And as you shift softly under your blankets, lulled by storm-turned calm, you notice what Tolkien offers you here. The reminder that battles need not be won outright to carry meaning. Survival alone can be triumph, endurance against odds itself a victory, and dawn arriving at last the sweetest lullaby. Helm's Deep is not merely clash of swords. It is one night lasting forever where men proved they could resist extinction, where mortality itself stood against tide and said, "Enough." Thus you wander out of Helm's Deep with the image of broken ladders crashing, rain dwindling in morning fog, battered survivors standing exhausted but unbroken within their fortress. Hope fragile, but hope nonetheless. And the story presses forward, always onward, into new perils, leaving you gently with that strange comfort that no matter the shadow pressed upon walls, sometimes dawn finds its way to descend even the darkest mountains. You slip now from the echoes of Helm's Deep, the crash of ladders, the cries of orcs, the pounding of hooves, and into another current of the tale, one that has been growing quietly in shadow, waiting for its voice to thunder. While the warriors of Rohan defended their stronghold and Frodo trudged across barren soils with Sam, Merry, and Pippin, small and seemingly powerless, were carried ever deeper into their own thread of destiny. You follow them now, bound in rough ropes, jolted by their Uruk-hai captors across leagues of plain until at last the ground beneath changes. Grass thickens, roots rise like veins, and looming branches swallow sky. The sound of pursuit, of weapons clattering, grows faint, and another sound emerges, less urgent, but weightier than steel, the groaning of trees that are older than kingdoms. They are dragged into Fangorn, forest ancient as dread itself. Here the air feels heavier, soaked in memory and anger, yet it is not the crackling malice of Mordor or Moria. It is something slower, patient, quiet, but by no means gentle. Every trunk seems to watch, every branch to lean closer, every knotted root to whisper. Most forests hum with bird calls or rustlings, but Fangorn breathes differently. Here silence itself is a presence, older than men, older even than elves, and heavy with the knowledge of ages. The Uruk-hai press inward, but you almost sense the forest itself tightening, waiting. Into this gloom, the hobbits find reprieve, if grim reprieve, from their captors. Orcish factions quarrel, greed and tension snapping at one another until battle springs up among them. Amid the confusion, Merry and Pippin scramble free, ropes cut, scattering desperately through tree shadows. Fear drives them deeper into Fangorn, farther from their pursuers and closer to something far stranger. For in these woods they encounter beings forgotten by most, beings whose pace is slow, yet whose fury smolders hotter than any forge. Ents. The first they meet towers high, bark-skinned, leaf-fringed, moving with such deliberation it takes moments to discern him from the trees around. Treebeard, he names himself, though his elven name, Fangorn, ties him to the forest itself. His voice rolls low, rumbling like gravel dragged down river, his words drawn out with patience. To spend even 5 minutes with him is to realize that his concept of time and your own could not be further apart. Ents speak slowly. They decide slower still because, as he explains, it takes a long time to say anything worth saying. Merry and Pippin, jittering with youth and haste, struggle to match this rhythm. Yet strangely, given time, you see them finding calm in his cadences. Perhaps this is what Fangorn teaches most. Slowness is not weakness. Time, stretched wide, allows perspective unmatched. Treebeard speaks of ages past when forests stretched far wider, when his people roamed plentiful, before darkness and axes thinned them nearly to nothing. There is sorrow in him deep as roots, but also suspicion, To speak with hobbits is odd. To speak of the One Ring odder still. Through the Entmoot, a gathering of his kin, you sense what patience truly means. Hours pass like days, days pass like seasons, the Ents conversing in long rumblings while Merry and Pippin look on restlessly. Meanwhile, the world beyond burns with urgency. Saruman builds war machines. Mordor strengthens its hand. And yet the Ents cannot be rushed. They must reason in tree time, speak in root language. It is enough to drive the hasty mad, but it is precisely this slowness that makes their eventual decision thunder with such force. For when the Ents finally rise, their wrath is not measured in numbers, but in inevitability. Here lie theories upon theories. Some say the Ents were Tolkien's own answer to machinery, nature rising against industry, trees against engines. Others see in them echoes of Norse mythology, Yggdrasil's children striding through sagas. Whatever avatar you take them for, the truth within the story is simple and stunning. The slowest beings, mocked for their inertia, erupt at last into motion, and that eruption changes everything. Treebeard leads them, roots thundering as they step, a forest put into stride. The Ents march upon Isengard. Saruman, who stripped Fangorn's edges for fuel, who turned soil into soot, now receives consequence. Imagine the Tower of Orthanc ringed not by shallow streams, but by forests set free. The boom of trunks cracking walls, the roar of water redirected to flood, the hurling of immense boulders by arms stronger than stone. Isengard trembles before the fury of nature itself, a fury carefully kept in check until provoked beyond silence. The image is strangely restful in itself, is it not? Slow, patient beings refusing anger until anger becomes justice. Their march is not chaotic but deliberate, their vengeance careful, measured. Unlike the reckless fires of orcs, their wrath is restorative. They do not conquer for domination's sake, but to halt destruction. And so Saruman, high in his tower, finds himself caged not by kings or armies, but by what he underestimated most, the quiet power of rooted things. As per the books, Tolkien invests long passages into Ent song, their rhythm of thoughts spilling into language like water over stone. The film condenses for urgency, yet preserves their impact. The sudden overwhelming of Isengard, industrial furnaces drowned, iron torn apart, like tinder before storms. Both versions hold the same heartbeat. When the world of the fast forgets the slow will one day answer with thunder. Meanwhile, Merry and Pippin themselves transform. No longer captives, no longer only companions dragged along, they become instigators. They speak for the Shire before the Ents, rousing them, stirring their patience into decision. It is their voices, small, playful, insistent, that tip the balance. Consider how remarkable that is. Two hobbits, half the height of men and centuries younger than Ents, awaken a forest to its purpose. Here, again, Tolkien's choice shines. The overlooked, the underestimated, bearing the current of history forward. Theories also touch upon Saruman's defeat here. Was it inevitable? Could even his cunning foresee forests moving his armies? Some suggest his obsession made him blind, overconfident that industry was invincible, that fire and wheels would always outpace trunks and branches. Others suggest fate chose this path, that Ents, long dormant, needed only the right spark at the right time, and that Saruman provided it by his very cruelty. His failure thus was not only arrogance, but inevitability written the moment he turned axe against the groves. From above, Isengard gleams ringed with floodwaters, its smokestacks extinguished, its orcs scattered or drowned. And amid this devastation stand Merry and Pippin, perched atop stone, amazed at themselves, astonished at what they have witnessed. They nibble pilfered food, joke in fatigue, and yet both know something grand has shifted. They are no longer burdens, no longer just halflings swept along. They are catalysts who saved a land from ruin. You almost want to sit beside them, sharing crumbs of salted meat, feeling the earth still trembling faintly with root thunder, and know you, too, walked through the rising. It is soothing to think that even the slowest, quietest forces awaken when pressed, and when they do, they can reshape history. That is what trees remind you in dream state. Patience is not weakness, silence is not absence. Even as you rest now, drifting further toward sleep, you may imagine that somewhere in your own life, slow roots are pushing deeper, preparing their strength, waiting until the moment they too will rise. And so the Ents stride back into shadow, their rage spent but their watch renewed. Isengard lies transformed, Saruman diminished. The hobbits smile wearily, and the rhythm of the world carries forward, toward Gondor, toward Mordor, toward choices heavier still. But in your imagination tonight, you let Fangorn linger, the steady whisper of branches overhead, and the rumble of Treebeard's voice reminding you that when you are weary of haste, there exists strength in simply standing firm. Past the flooded ruins of Isengard and the forest's thunderous vindication, your attention shifts back to subtler dangers, those that do not strike with whip or sword, but with glimpses, whispers, and temptation. For while armies still clash upon the plains, a quieter battle is waged in the dark recesses of the mind and soul. This battle moves not on fields of Rohan or Gondor, but within small polished orbs, Palantiri, the seeing stones of Númenórean legend. Once crafted to connect leaders across great distances, shining gifts meant for counsel and clarity, they have now become perilous lenses of corruption in the hands of powers bent upon domination. Your path follows the Fellowship's remnants now interwoven with Rohan's tide of survival. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, after the salvation at Helm's Deep, march with Gandalf white-robbed back toward Isengard. What they find is not a stronghold roaring with forges, but a drowned pit, stone ringed with water, devastation etched by ant wrath. From Orthink's black spike, Saruman peers downward, trapped in the one place he once commanded. He hurls words still edged with his slippery mastery, but the power behind them is fractured. The company gathers before him, and Gandalf's voice, once his equal only, now ascends. Stripped, Saruman's staff splits in Gandalf's command, its shards clattering like the very end of ambition fallen. Yet from this defeated council emerges the next danger. Wormtongue, ever the slinking servant, casts down a heavy orb, dark and gleaming, nearly overlooked but for Pippin's curious gaze. Gandalf, stern and swift, seizes it, hiding it in his cloak. The Palantir of Orthink, forgotten only moments earlier, is now a shadow cradled in cloth, so innocuous and small compared to armies and battles that its potency might be underestimated. But danger, as you have walked learning, rarely comes only in what is loudest. Most often, it slinks in silence. At night, while fires die low and others rest, Pippin's curiosity becomes unbearable. He steals quietly to Gandalf's bundle and pulls the orb free. To hold it is to feel weight both physical and dreadful. The stone is heavy as doom yet smooth, its depths ink-dark, but glowing faintly, as if stars gleamed inside blackness. When Pippin peeks into it, light gushes suddenly across him, as though he has peered too close to a burning sun. He gasps, eyes wide, his small frame shuddering. In that moment, his mind is bridged directly to will and malice ancient. Sauron gazes upon him. Anguish ripples through the camp as Gandalf rushes to pry the orb from his hands. Pippin collapses, breathing ragged, his words incoherent at first, images of flame, of the eye, of dark tower corridors twisting around him. Though he lives, his innocence has brushed the very core of dread. He is marked not in flesh, but in trauma. The Palantir, bright gift turned prison, has revealed one of its cruelest truths. Clarity is but another path for manipulation. What was originally intended to unify voices across distance now binds living souls directly to Sauron's gaze. It is here that Tolkien's subtler warning rises. Tools of knowledge, even those intended for good, never remain neutral in the hands of power. Vision becomes vulnerability, connection becomes exploitation. The Palantiri did not change, their design remained. But the eye that peers through one corner corrupts all streams flowing through them. Much as the ring itself amplifies both good and evil, so too knowledge laid bare can empower or destroy. As per the books, Tolkien lingers upon the Palantiri as artifacts of an older age, relics from the Dunedain's glory. Aragorn's bloodline ties him to their rightful use, yet even he hesitates, knowing they are perilous in Sauron's hand. The film condenses events. Pippin nearly laughs nervously in his terror, but the menace remains. You, the listener, see now in this artifact something terrifyingly familiar. Curiosity, innocent and human, clashing against forces far too great for simple grasp. Theories swirl like fog about what was seen precisely in Pippin's glimpse. Was it mere intimidation, a showing of Orthink's ruin, a fleeting glimpse of the eye designed to break morale? Or did Sauron, deceived into thinking Pippin the ring-bearer, unleash hope prematurely upon Gondor? Some suggest this twist, that Sauron's error in interpretation shifted much of his gaze toward Minas Tirith, thinking the ring opposite Mordor rather than creeping treacherously closer through Ethel Duith with Frodo and Sam. Thus, Pippin's reckless act, seemingly a disaster, instead becomes part of the chain of fortune. This irony, blunders leading to unimagined opportunity, threads throughout the story as a whole. Gandalf himself, stern but still compassionate, understands this paradox. He does not lash out in wrath at Pippin, but recognizes the deeper alignment of chance. Even in folly, Providence speaks. And so he adjusts strategy. He takes Pippin swiftly by horse, galloping toward Gondor to place him under Denethor's gaze, to divert fate's momentum where it must root. Gandalf seems often a steward of chance as much as wisdom, bending mishap until it carries purpose. But pause here and consider something more intimate. The Palantiri tempt not only with knowledge, but with the fascinating act itself of seeing. To glimpse beyond the present, beyond distance, is something every mortal heart craves. To peer ahead into danger, to remove uncertainty from sleepless nights. Yet the lesson is carving. Too much sight may blind. Like the mirror of Galadriel, the Palantir reveals without context, and without context, fear reigns supreme. Events may only be half glimpsed, yet acted upon rashly, and in that rashness lies ruin. Indeed, this is the eye's true cruelty, not merely showing fire and doom, but skewing truth through fragments. In the rhythm of bedtime reflection, the Palantir becomes a cautionary lullaby. Imagine yourself holding such an orb. Would you determine wisely the visions within, or would your heart clutch at shadow, assuming only the worst? Would you manage the balance between foresight and paranoia? Perhaps this is why sleep, in its gentler magic, remains superior to such stones. You glimpse your future as dream rather than decree, softened enough so you awaken with hope instead of terror. Beyond strategy, this moment shifts characters inward. Aragorn acknowledges openly his blood's claim over such artifacts, confiding his fear even as he recognizes the duty to wield one when time comes. Pippin, though shaken, begins to grow beyond reckless comic relief, tempered now by direct brush with the enemy. Gandalf presses forward with urgency not born merely from wisdom, but from instinct tugging at Providence's sleeve. Threads move ahead, each pull from the orb reshaping where tides may later crash. And yet, the quiet power of this section doesn't end with Pippin's frightened gasp. It echoes further on into Denethor's story, whose madness is sharpened precisely because he, too, gazes into a Palantir. Unlike Pippin's accidental glimpse, Denethor uses it willingly, desperately, searching for mastery. Without context, he sees fleets of foes and reads doom where chance still breathes. Thus the stone is neither evil nor good. It is lens without compass, magnifier without mercy. Only the bearer shapes its doom. Theories also ask, what if Frodo had touched the Palantir? Would its visions accelerate the ring's grip beyond relief? Would Sam, perhaps, dismiss it entirely, thus proving once again the peculiar resiliency of hobbits against devices beyond them? You wander lightly with these questions, not needing answers, but letting their comfort reside in the reminder that unseen roads always extend outward, full of what-ifs and maybes. When the company rides from Isengard's drenched ruin, with orb hidden and plans reshaped, there is a solemnity stitched into them. Saruman's voice has been muffled, yet his influence lingers. The Palantir glows unseen, yet its consequence resonates. It is not swords ringing in the air, but a small globe, orbs of sight, that now redirects alliances and choices. You marvel, even as you drift deeper into your pillow, how Tolkien consistently reminds you. The world is not changed only by clashing steel, but by quiet, polished objects that rest in the palms of fools or kings. And so as the roads bend onward toward Gondor and Mordor alike, you sink further into sleep, hearing faint echoes not of drums or marching feet, but of whispers, whispers from stone, from visions, from possibility. With eyes closed, it is easy to imagine being Pippin for a moment, hands trembling over glowing depths, and then turning away just in time, choosing instead softer darkness where no cursed visions intrude. Tonight, let the Palantiri remind you, seeing is not always knowing, and sometimes the safest sight is to let tomorrow arrive slowly, like dawn cresting over fields, and not force it awake by grasping fire. The air grows heavier as you drift closer to Mordor, not only in the landscape, but in the company itself. For this phase of the tale turns inward, intimate and unervingly fragile, carried by three small figures across the grinding path of mountains and marsh. Frodo and Sam now have their companion, not by choice and love, but by necessity, Gollum. And it is here, walking at their side, that the deepest reflection in the story begins, for Gollum is both guide and mirror. He leads them toward the Black Gate, through swamps that carry the stench of ancient battles, over crags where rock cuts skin and faith alike, and yet every step is haunted by the question, can trust and betrayal walk together? You tread lightly with them as they first encounter Gollum more directly. His approach is like shadows sprouting limbs, clambering across rocks, muttering, his body thin as strands of sinew stretched too far, his eyes bright with unnerving glimmer. Sam leaps immediately to chaos, snarling with suspicion, brandishing his blade. Frodo, however, holds restraint. He sees more than monster in this ragged thing. He sees a soul frayed nearly into nothing, but not yet nothing. Perhaps it is the ring's weight pressing him towards sympathy. Perhaps it is an echo of pity first shown by Bilbo long ago, when he spared this creature in a dark cavern beneath the misty mountains. Bound by rope, forced into uneasy servitude, Gollum writhes and resists. Yet soon, a fragile kind of trust is born. He swears fealty, speaking in twisted syntax, promising Smeagol will serve the master of the precious. And so the dynamic cracks open. Within his split voice lie hints of duality, two sides scraping constantly against each other. Gollum the treacherous, hunched by hunger and cruelty. Smeagol the pitiful, hand reaching for scraps of kindness. Their conflict vibrates through every interaction. One moment he hisses hatred, the next he crouches like a dog grateful for scraps of bread or gentleness. Here the ring's corruption is lit in starkest study. Through Gollum you see what Frodo could become. Through his mutterings, his crouched frame, his tether to the precious, you glimpse tomorrow's possible Frodo if the path consumes him. And Frodo knows it. Again and again, he glances at his guide not only with distrust but with horror, seeing glimpses of himself. That is his greatest reason for pity. Pity for his own future, pity for all who are twisted by voices they cannot silence. As the trio traverses the dead marshes, this mirror grows more haunting. The land is a nightmare. Pools of stagnant water stretch endlessly, murky with weeds and half-seen shapes. Frodo stumbles closer to the water's surface and sees faces beneath. The dead from battles long buried. Eyes pale, lips cracked, their forms flickering faintly as though flames still licked at them beneath brine. "Don't follow the lights," Gollum insists, panic sharp in his tone. "Do not look into the faces." For he knows this lure, has witnessed its cruelty. The dead will never rise, yet they beckon, pulling wanderers into despair until breath is forever swallowed. What is notable here is how Tolkien bends time. That battle long ago, elves, men, orcs falling upon each other, keeps its scar visible upon the earth. The dead remain, their memory preserved not in song, but in miasma. You pass through history not as story, but as geography thickened with grief. Middle-earth teaches constantly that past wars do not remain in past. They haunt terrain, water, even air. You cannot walk indifferent, for ground itself breathes memory into the lungs. The trio continues onward to the Black Gate itself, Mordor's threshold. Towers rise like skeletal claws, iron and dread woven into architecture itself. Gates swing with menace. Hills bristle with watchtowers. Armies march through, endless as ants yet more dreadful than locusts. Frodo and Sam crouch with breath shallow, seeing the truth for the first time. To enter Mordor openly would be death instant and certain. The futility weighs upon them. But here Gollum whispers another path, the secret of Cirith Ungol, a hidden way to creep inward rather than face that impossible gate. And though trust is fraught, it is this whisper that pulls them further east, toward a doom tangled with betrayal far stranger yet. It is in this wandering with Gollum that Tolkien's work presses most deeply into psychological theory. For Gollum is not only an antagonist or guide, he is a fragmented psyche walking bipedal. He is both abuser and victim of himself, enacting betrayal against his will, reminding us of those voices one cannot silence within one's own skin. Perhaps this is why Frodo understands him, though Sam cannot. For Frodo carries his own whispers. The ring on his chest burns with suggestions, coaxing, malice disguised as promises, while Sam, free from that direct entanglement, sees only danger plainly. It leads to conflict between them, the seed that will sprout division later upon the slopes of Mordor. As per the books, Tolkien allows Frodo's pity for Gollum to deepen steadily, showing how their relationship is one of both reflection and necessity. The films sharpen this duality by visualizing Smeagol and Gollum squabbling in dialogue with themselves, a conversation of inner conflict made external. Both forms imprint upon us the same truth: pity, loyalty, suspicion, all circling together in an uneasy knot that reveals human complexity even in its extremes. Theories grow abundantly around Gollum's fate. Could he ever have been redeemed if given more kindness sooner? Was his trajectory inevitable, or is it his very duality that ensures doom? His fragile flickers of light always smothered before they can flame? Some say his role was predestined, to destroy himself with precious, even as that alone allows evil's downfall. Others imagine threads where he clings to Frodo, learns fidelity, perhaps one day finds healing. And perhaps Tolkien, ever guarded, leaves that ambiguity intentionally. Salvation is possible always, but rarely is it seized without relinquishment. Gollum would not relinquish. For now, as you wander with them, savor instead the strange comfort of companionship, however imperfect. Frodo bears burden, Sam bears loyalty, Gollum bears knowledge. It is balance fragile and frightening, yet enough for each new step. They share dried lembas, though Gollum spits and gags against its taste, craving fish slippery from swamp, nice raw fish. They climb through marsh and mountain, whispering underbreath, sleeping in shifts. At night, Sam's eyes rarely leave Gollum, as if he might slit Frodo's throat any minute. Frodo, however, insists with soft words that Smeagol deserves chance, that all deserve pity. And so they press on, every moment teetering between faith and treachery. What soothes you in this section, dear sleeper, is that exploration of duality. This is not battle where swords clash, but battle of spirit, of self against self. Each has their reflections here. Frodo upon Gollum, Sam upon Frodo, Gollum upon his own fractured halves. And thus, by lantern's imagined glow or the dim shimmer of marsh lights, you drift with them, lulled by their hushed argument, rocked by the rhythm of mistrust and endurance. The landscape may grow harsher with each stride, barren lands open, peaks edge sharper against sky, Mordor's gloom pulses closer, but what endures, strangely, is the companionship itself. Small though their meals are, little though their comforts may be, the simple fact that they remain together holds magic subtler than Galadriel's file. This companionship, fragile though it fractures later, resounds with a truth you may carry into your sleep, that even against impossible shadows, three fragile voices walking together can still hush despair for another day. From the lonely marches of Frodo, Sam, and their restless, treacherous companion, the story bends back west, sweeping into a land of stone where an entire nation trembles on the precipice of ruin. Gondor, white towers glittering with fated pride, leans anxiously over the horizon of its survival. And here, you find yourself wading into the great conflict of Minas Tirith, where shadow presses for Mordor in waves none can ignore, and where courage battles despair in ways more subtle than sword clashes alone. The siege of Gondor carries you now, not only across battlements and clattering steel, but into hearts shaken by fear. The city itself is the first sight to hold you in awe, Minas Tirith, carved into the mountain like a layered crown. 7 circles rising tier upon tier, white walls gleaming though weathered, gates layered one above the other until the citadel pierces sky itself. Beneath its grandeur, you feel the burden of years, the nobility of a kingdom that remembers its glory more than it enacts it. Once Gondor stood at full height, vast fleets, great kings, dominions stretched across lands. Now it is weary, haunted by the decline of men, and nowhere is this clearer than in Denethor, its steward. You picture Denethor upon his high chair, not radiant like kings of old, but a man turned inward, weighed down by suspicion and sight warped by his secret gaze into a palantir. Through that orb, he has seen only fragmentary truths. The might of Sauron's armies, their gathering beyond count, their engines of war being rolled upon fields. What he has not seen, the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses of Mordor, he interprets as proof of inevitable doom. To live steered by half-visions is to live consumed by futility, and thus Denethor decays even while seated upon Gondor's proudest throne. Into this space strides Gandalf, with Pippin at his side. The hobbit, small even in the lowest courts of men, feels dwarfed utterly by the marble halls, the ringing of feet on stone, banners heavy in shadow. And yet tradition bends. He pledges his service to Gondor, flame lighting in small hands where Denethor had almost extinguished it. Gandalf knows danger is far from abstract. Armies march tangibly in this direction, and he counsels preparation with steel and with faith. Soon enough you look outward from the walls and see what Denethor saw. Lines of armies blacker than storm clouds, banners lifted high, siege engines dragged upon massive wheels, hordes of orcs snarling, trolls lumbering under chains, all gathering before the white city like a sea bruised dark. The Pelennor fields, broad and green once, tremble under weight of that horde. Smoke from Mordor curls nearer daily, pressing across skies until even sunlight falters. And so begins what feels, in tone, less like battle than like slow suffocation. The drums of Mordor resound endlessly, a pulse that denies sleep. The walls of Minas Tirith groan as stones hurled by siege catapults slam upon them. Towers quake, and the courage of soldiers falters. Pippin, clutching spear near comically large compared to his size, trembles yet still steps forward. For every man, woman, and halfling upon those walls grasps the same truth. There is nowhere further to flee. Yet amidst despair, Gandalf moves like a lantern. His horse, Shadowfax, gleams even amid shadow's reach. His voice, stern, encouraging, calls weary soldiers back into stance. He knows the battle rides deeper than stone walls. It thrums in the human spirit. Keep them from breaking, he insists, and maybe stone will endure also. Inside the tower, the struggle with Denethor worsens. His mind, sickened by visions twisted through the Palantir, yields more fully to despair. When Faramir, his younger son, noble yet worn, rides out bravely to attempt to hold Osgiliath, Denethor condemns him already, as though death is inevitable. And when Faramir, wounded near to dying, is dragged back into the city on litter, Denethor collapses entirely. His despair transforms into madness, the refusal to fight, the intent even to burn himself and his son upon a pyre. To watch him is to see leadership curdle into poison. A man meant to preserve has chosen obliteration instead, vaster tragedy for the city itself than even enemy engines. As per the books, Tolkien paints Denethor with bitter sharpness, haughty intelligence rotted by despair. His madness is not sudden but logical, a progression shaped by over-reliance on instruments meant for wisdom but offering doom. The films render him with particular venom, sloppy meals, mistrust turned to cruelty, dramatizing his decay. Both remind you of the same truth. Despair kills as efficiently as sword points. Meanwhile, the enemy grows ever closer. Flaming heads hurled across battlements strike terror deeper than wounds. Gates crack beneath trolls' massive hammers. And then, the stillness before disaster. Despair as the gates finally burst inward. From within the rolling fire emerges the Witch King of Angmar, Lord of the Nazgul, captain of this endless storm. His darkness fills the gate itself, his cry shrieks over stone, and it feels for one pure moment that all light in the world has been hushed. Yet Gandalf does not yield. He rides forward to meet this shadow, his staff lifted, his sword gleaming. And though battle between them is not yet joined fully, delayed by horns echoing from Rohan's approach, it is enough to inspire breath again among the hopeless. For light does not fall silent, not even here. And now, what theories circle this battle? Many argue Sauron made a central mistake. He paired his overwhelming army not with invisibility, but with spectacle. His sheer size of force, clear to see across leagues, rallied not only fear, but desperate courage in allies who could no longer stand aside. Had he chosen subtler movement, Gondor might have failed quietly. Instead, the sheer arrogance of his tidal wave made the board visible to all, and thus Rohan, thus Aragorn, thus all the free folk could not avoid being stirred to stand. Others mused that Denethor's madness, though horrible, indirectly aided Gandalf's command. With no stable steward to obstruct him, Gandalf was able to direct defense unfettered, keeping Gondor alive long enough for rescue. Despair, paradoxically, forced clarity elsewhere. Such thoughts swirl like ash caught in flame, missteps that birth the possibility of survival. What stays with you most here, however, is how ordinary the defenders are. Beyond kings and wizards, you imagine men leaning against pikes, too exhausted to lift them again, yet lifting still because night has not yet passed. You see children carrying water across walls, their arms trembling but their faces resolute because no one else is left. You picture Pippin gripping spear with sweaty palms, muttering of the Shire, wishing for second breakfasts and green fields, but standing anyway. It is not grandeur, but ordinariness, carrying Minas Tirith against annihilation. And thus, as you rest, you find not despair but comfort. Stories, you recognize, arc not always around victors striding unstoppable, but around fragile souls trembling and standing nonetheless. The Siege of Gondor teaches you this. Sometimes survival is the highest victory, the one that births later triumphs. When horns sound, Rohan approaching, and day breaks upon Pelennar's fields, hope rides in, not as fight concluded, but as proof that shadow has not devoured utterly. So, as dusk of narration quiets in your ears, Imagine standing upon Minas Tirith's wall, gazing outward while siege fires dim for a moment. You smell ash and hear cries still, but above them sound the horns of Rohan, clarion bright, riding to break shadows' hold. And just as you drift into your own sleep, you let the certainty settle gently. Even in the deepest nights, dawn may arrive at last, loud and golden. The horns of Rohan still sound faintly in your ears as the tale bends onward, drawing you not north nor west, but under mountains where silence holds sway and the air itself feels bound to forgotten oaths. For if Minas Tirith represents humanity's courage beneath siege, then Aragorn's path into the paths of the dead represents something different. The confrontation of ancient promises and the unsettling weight of unfinished duty. You follow him now, stepping not across green battlefields, but beneath the cold shadow of haunted stone, where the living and the spectral brush against one another in uneasy recognition. The company that turns eastward toward the Dwemorbert, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and a contingent of the Rangers of the North, carries weight far beyond the clanking of weapons. There is urgency in their silence, for time itself feels an enemy as urgent as Mordor's armies. Word has reached them of Gundor's desperation, Minas Tirith pressed tight against ruin, yet the road to salvation does not lead first to open plains, but into haunted darkness. For upon Aragorn's shoulders now lies not only the pressure of kinship and survival, but the mantle of kingship. And kingship requires more than swords. It requires reckoning with promises long broken. The mountain opens with a fissure that seems less carved by hand than torn downward by the world's pain. The entrance yawns before them, ancient inscriptions still visible across its stones, declaring warnings, declaring that none but the heir of Isildur may walk forward alive. To approach this cave is already to test faith. Believe in Aragorn's claim of lineage, or bulk. Yet no one turns back. It is more than loyalty. It is something closer to inevitability. The failings of past ages draw them in, compelling resolution. As you picture their torches flaring against the black rock, note how the spaces immediately swallow light. Shadows lean hungrily, damp air condenses upon walls, and strange whispers echo faintly, as if the mountain itself remembers voices long since extinguished. The road plunges downward, twisting across stone halls and disquieting caverns, air so thick one wonders if breathing it allows spirits to press into lungs. And then, the flickering presence begins. Shapes like men, yet vapor thin, drifting in half-seen swirls. Faces like memories only half-formed. Eyes, sockets empty yet aflame with faint awareness, mouths locked in perpetual vows. These are the oath breakers, the army of the dead. To understand them, you recall their origin. Once they swore to Isildur to ride beside him against Sauron. But when time came, they faltered, they hid, they betrayed their oath. And so he cursed them, to remain restless, bound upon this mountain, until his heir called and they fulfilled what they had forsaken. For centuries, they lingered, feared by all living, stories turned into warnings for children. They remained unfinished chapters of history, unresolved as wounds unhealed. It is Aragorn's boldness here that transforms dread into purpose. Where any other man would quail before spectral forms, his voice carries unshaken, declaring heritage, declaring demand. They must fulfill oath at last. His authority trembles not with noise or arrogance, but with something deeper, the weight of truth unbroken. And though the army of ghosts whirls menacingly at first, soon even their whispers soften. The way Aragorn speaks, you can imagine, is not only command but recognition. He sees them not as monsters but as men. Men trapped in a curse of their own shame, hungering after release. Legolas and Gimli, flanking him, embody the spectrum of reactions. The elf, attuned to spirits, feels awe rather than terror. To Legolas, this alignment with shadowed souls is yet one more reminder that Middle-earth breathes in layers others ignore. Gimli, by contrast, trembles, acts quaking, distrust bristling as he bites back any thought of retreat. In his gruff muttering is recognition of how wrong, how unnatural such beings feel. Yet he walks still, proving courage lies not in the absence of fear, but movement through it. Here in this cavern, theories echo richly. Were the dead truly bound only by Isildur's curse, or had they bound themselves even more powerfully with their own shame? Did they wait centuries for Aragorn precisely because fate wrote that only the rightful king could release them? Or could any with sufficient will have commanded them at last? Some imagine they lingered because the narrative itself, the destiny of men, required their participation at this crucial hour. Others posit that their waiting is allegory. Guilt cannot fade unless confronted, no matter how many lifetimes pass. As per the book, Tolkien stretches their march through this haunted realm with weighted detail, lingering on dread, on ghostlight flickering as though torches fought against memory itself. The film compresses but dramatizes more overtly the avalanche of spectral warriors, their tide-consuming foes like ocean-sweeping sandcastles. Each rendition carries the same bone-deep truth. The dead, when finally unleashed, are force immeasurable not because of numbers, but because of centuries of penance erupting at last into fulfillment. You follow Aragorn's company as they emerge again from the mountain's far mouth, torches dwindling while daylight pierces thin. Behind them now, shadowy but real, trails the army of the dead, thrumming like a storm barely restrained. This is not simply army conjured. It is ancient wrongs demanding resolution. And Aragorn, by daring, by lineage, sets them free not into scattered air, but into action. They sweep with him across southern Gondor, breaking Sauron's corsair fleets that would otherwise have cut Minas Tirith utterly from aid. What appeared unstoppable in darkness becomes Gondor's salvation. The White City, pressed within siege, suddenly finds fresh winds stirred because a man chose to descend into the dark and speak words to the restless. Theory again whispers here. Would Minas Tirith have endured without this haunted intervention? Some argue yes, that Rohirrim charges and stout defense could have carried. But others point to crushing numbers, to Blackfleet's unstoppable save by Aragorn's spectral force. If this is truth, then the victory of Pelennor owes itself not just to riders, not to wizards, but to an ancient promise forgotten by many but remembered by one. History, once more, loops around. Betrayals become salvation, failure becomes force for redemption. For you, adrift in the rhythm of this telling, what soothes especially is how this passage teaches. Debts may weigh upon us for lifetimes, but resolution is possible. Guilt need not chain forever. By recognition, by courage, by facing shadows, wrongs can be transfigured into redemption. And though armies of ghosts may not march within your own life, burdens do, burdens long denied, long buried, surging forward just when dawn feels most distant. If even the men of the mountain can see release, then so perhaps can all shadows. As the company sets its sails upon ships wrested from corsairs, spectral hands laid upon ropes that glimmer faintly, Aragorn breathes deeper. For the first time, he is not ranger alone but king in clear demonstration. The heir has not merely claimed throne through word or pedigree. He has commanded the uncommandable. He has bound ancient history into present victory. It is both eerie and deeply satisfying, a reminder that leadership sometimes demands stepping where no one dares tread. And so, when their black sails unfurl across Anduin's river, sweeping toward Gondor, imagine the sight. Armies despairing upon Pelennor glance upward, seeing ships they expect full of enemies. And then, upon their release, spectral armies pour forth, crushing Sauron's hordes. Hope spins on its axis. The dead have walked at last toward rest, purchasing their peace with action long denied. And for you, nestled in your own bed, it is a haunting but gentle note that no promise, once made, vanishes into nothing. Promises live, waiting, even across centuries, and when fulfilled, they can change the world entire. That is the gift the paths of the dead bring to this tale. The quiet, chilling, but ultimately comforting assurance that wrongs can be set right, no matter how deeply buried in mountain stone. The black sails fade behind you now, their ghostly promise fulfilled, and your attention sweeps once more eastward to the trembling heart of the tale, toward Mordor itself, and to the solitary journey of Frodo and Sam as they press deeper into desolation. For though the riders thunder victorious upon Pelennor and Gondor breathes again, the true thread of doom carries not upon horses, but in the weary steps of two hobbits climbing steadily into fire. It is here, upon the path to Mount Doom, that Middle-earth narrows into focus, and where destiny crystallizes not in grand armies, but in one trembling hand carrying a ring. You walk alongside them across blackened earth. The nearer to Mordor they tread, the more the land itself seems transformed into a wound. Volcanoes smoking in the distance, air choked with ash, stones sharp with jagged cruelty. The ground is scarred by fissures that belch sulfur, streams dried into channels of dust. Almost no bird rises, no leaf stirs. Life itself recoils from this proximity to Sauron's power. Here the eye feels unbearably close, though unseen, pulsing like heat upon the nape of one's neck. Frodo bends forward more with each day, as though the weight of the ring drags not from his chain, but from the very marrow of his bones. Sam keeps pace beside him, ever steady, though his face too grows lined with worry. His optimism, once bubbling with talk of gardens and stews, trims itself now into sharper hope, hope focused wholly upon keeping Frodo moving. He is gardener still, but instead of coaxing sprouts from soil, he coaxes will from fading spirit. His small words of encouragement function like lembas, simple sustenance that keeps Frodo from collapsing entirely. Yet Sam sees, as you do, how the ring devours piece by piece. Frodo's hand tremors when he lifts it, his eyes glaze more often toward craving, his very breath shortens. Gollum, still slinking beside them, grows darker also. His uneasy alliance grows brittle, Smeagol fading steadily as the ring draws closer. He watches Frodo with hunger undisguised, muttering to himself, plotting with a desperation that blends love and hate into syrup of madness. You can see Frodo, in his compassion, still treating him with pity, coaxing him as though he might yet reform. But Sam bristles, his body positioned protectively, his suspicion louder than trust ever could be. These tensions coil until even you, drifting in this narrative, feel the inevitable fracture approaching. Their journey bends along the jagged ridges of Ethel Duath and up the dark path of Cirith Ungol. This way, whispered by Gollum, is not safe. No way into Mordor is, but it is hidden, a winding stair that clings precariously to cliffs, climbing ever higher until terror replaces exhaustion. The narrowness alone terrifies. Each step could end in plunge into abyss, stone crumbling beneath feet. The air grows thin, the stench of sulfur stronger, the silence suffocating. Gollum lingers behind them at moments, whispering to shadows as though colluding, only barely restraining his own malice. And then the climax of his betrayal unfolds, not with sword or army, but with chittering silk. For deep in these cliffs lies Shelob, spider ancient, monstrous beyond measure. A creature older than orcs, glutted upon the darkness Sauron himself permits, Shelob dwells at crossroads of nightmare and nature. Gollum leads Frodo there like lamb to slaughter, whispering, "She'll take it, and will be free of burden." His treachery is not subtle but anticipatory, an echo of his own unresolved conflict. Part of him still wishes to be loyal, yet his craving transforms loyalty into weapon. The moment of Shelob's ambush is suffocating. Dark tunnels close around them, webs stretching across ceilings thick as rope, stench of carrion flooding. Frodo falters, sensing too late that he has walked into trap. From shadow rises the gargantuan form, many eyes glimmering, legs clicking against stone, fangs dripping venom. The sheer scale overwhelms. Shelob is hunger given form. one of the last remnants of an age when monstrosities traipsed openly across world. Against such malice, Frodo seems absurdly fragile. His sword's sting flashes, Galadriel's file gleams with pure light, and briefly the darkness recoils. Yet Shelob presses, cunning and immense. The file's light itself becomes symbol more than weapon, for Galadriel's gift carries power not simply of elvish magic, but of memory smoldering. It reminds Frodo of what lies beyond Mordor, stars unbroken, hope unquenched, things not drowned entirely in shadow. For a heartbeat, you breathe relief. Yet Shelob is patient as death. She maneuvers, coils, and strikes. Venom pierces Frodo's neck. He collapses inert. Though not killed, he appears slain, paralyzed utterly. And in that moment, Sam believes his dearest friend lost. Here Sam rises into his fullest stature. Grief crystallizes into rage, courage stripping away his fear. He takes Sting himself, wielding it fiercely, and hurls himself at Shelob with vengeance. Too small, too unlikely, yet his love paves strength beyond measure. Blow after blow he strikes, until the great spider wails, wounded, limping back into depths she had long claimed unchallenged. Sam stands in silent cavern, panting, friend unmoving, monster retreating. It is as though the entire world has shrunk to this one impossible moment. Sam alone, sword trembling in his hand, having faced nightmare for the sake of love. In this instant, you recognize the deepest heart of Tolkien's tale. True courage does not glimmer in kings or armies, but in gardeners who stand when shadow laughs at their stature. Sam, the one counted least, proves fiercest, but the pain sharpens again. Believing Frodo dead, Sam weeps, clutching his small master, aching as though his own heart has been gouged. He gathers the ring, claiming it for safekeeping. This choice is monumental. He does not wish for it. He does not crave it. Yet he accepts restraint's burden. And though heavy, though whispering against his mind already, Sam bears it with a purity unmatched. He does not envision dominion or glory, only the continuing of his promise, to bear Frodo's load even past death. Yet Frodo is not dead. Captured by Orc patrol, his body dragged roughly upward into towers of Cirith Ungol, Frodo remains alive, though poisoned. Sam now must push further still, climbing this dark fortress alone, blade against mobs of sneering orcs, ring against his chest urging constantly its dark whispers. Here Sam transforms from sidekick to hero undisguised. The gardener becomes warrior of legend, not because blades, but because fidelity shaped into action. As per the books, Tolkien lingers carefully on Sam's inner monologue, his grief, his temptation, and his fumbling bravery. The films sharpen intensity into visual spectacles, Shelob's biting lunge, Sam's gleam under Galadriel's file, orcs snarling amid towers. Yet both remind you of one truth. When Frodo falters, Sam carries him. When despair consumes, Sam chooses endurance. That simple gardener carries hope on behalf of all. Theories abound upon this section. Could Sam have borne the ring all the way, resisting it fully? Some say yes. His humility anchored him better than any. Others argue it would have corroded him also, though slower, twisting his love of growth into destruction like gardener turned tyrant. Perhaps, though, this is irrelevant, for Sam's gift is not ownership but safeguard. He holds it only as promise, not as dream. His role is not new ring bearer, but loyal hand that never lets go. Meanwhile, stepping outward, forces converge. In Gondor victory brews, armies scatter, but Sauron's eye blinds him through pride. He gathers himself wholly to confront Gondor, believing ring in their midst. Little does he reckon that two hobbits, stumbling near faint through volcanic ash, remain the truest threat. It is here that the long structure of the tale reveals itself. Distraction through grandeur, salvation through the overlooked. For you, slowly drifting tonight, this might be the cradling thought, that even when venom strikes, when betrayal coils, when error seems final, loyalty can rise as shield. Sam upon black stone, gripping sting, standing alone before webs and whispers, is the lullaby of fidelity. You need not vanquish armies. Sometimes it is enough simply to refuse to abandon. And so the road presses onward, toward Orodruin, Flame's heart, where doom itself smolders. Frodo and Sam remain fragile in form, but immense in consequence, staggering nearer with each step less than human, yet more than myth. You journey beside them, feeling each ache, each breath, letting it cradle you softly toward dreams, soothed not by absence of shadow, but by recognition of light enduring within it. The journey draws at last into its final fires. From the dizzying webs of Cirith Ungol and the desolation of the Ashlands, you move alongside Frodo and Sam into the very marrow of Mordor, toward the furnace of Mount Doom where the threads of all the world converge. This is no triumphant march, no gleaming clatter of armies. It is weary, halting, bodies broken down to trembling. By now, food dwindles to crumbs of lembas, so dry the tongue feels parched with every bite. Water grows scarce, and each swallow is a desperate rationing, a reminder of how near they stand to collapse. And yet still they walk. This is the most haunting triumph of all, that two hobbits from the Green Shire, being small enough to go unnoticed at feasts, push their feet through blackened stone where kings falter. Mount Doom looms constantly ahead, a mass of smoldering rock. Its cracks leak ruddy glow, red fissures like veins of fury lacing its slopes. The air itself vibrates, a dull roar always muttering from its summit, as if the mountain itself breathes malice. Even you, resting in safety, imagine the weight of that atmosphere pressing so low your lungs ache. Frodo staggers most now. The ring does not simply whisper in temptation anymore. It howls along every nerve. To him, each step is borne not only under burden, but under compulsion. Its voice demands wearing it, demands claiming it, demands bending to its will. His frame, thin and pale, leans forward as though pulled invisibly by a leash. Sam, loyal to the last, shoulders him when legs fold, literally carrying his master upon his back up the cruel slopes. This, more than any battle of Pelennor or Helm's Deep, embodies the deepest nobility of Middle-earth. One soul hauling another, not for glory, not for song, but for promise remembered. They crawl higher, stones grinding under their hands, until the ruined plain of Gorgoroth spreads beneath them, full of armies distracted by Gondor's feint. Here Providence again reveals itself. For Aragorn and his host, marching upon Mordor's Black Gate, is no act of domination but distraction, a deliberate invitation to Sauron's gaze. The Dark Lord pours all attention upon them, pride convinced they hold the ring in arrogance. This is perhaps his last, fatal blindness, to underestimate the invisible, to despise the small, to blind himself to salvation slipping past his very door. Sam's strength ebbs, yet his faith does not. He mutters of the Shire still, even gasping out half-formed descriptions of strawberries, of cream, of water in clean glasses. These musings feel oddly luminous here, not distractions but lifelines. The ability to imagine home even when surrounded by hell ensures one step more is possible. This is what hope looks like at its rawest, not certainty of outcome, but recollections of sweetness pulling you through ash. Finally, trembling, they reach the summit by paths jagged and narrow. The interior chamber of Orodruin greets them not as hollow cavern, but as wound pinned open, fire roaring in pits below, heat beating against skin as though air itself intends to flay. The ring pounds upon Frodo's chest, searing. Its birthplace calls it home. Here is the place where it can finally be destroyed, where one drop into flame ends Sauron utterly. You expect resolution, a completion burning clean. But Tolkien upends expectations here. Truth arrives not in neat obedience, but in human frailty. For Frodo, standing upon precipice, ring clutching in hand, pauses. His back straightens. His eyes glaze and brighten with fever of possession. And then softly, horrifyingly, He claims it. He does not cast it into fire. He raises it instead, declaring with trembling voice that it is his. After all the miles, after loss of friends, after slow death endured, Frodo succumbs in the final instant. This is not failure but revelation, that no one, not even the most steadfast hobbit, can resist indefinitely. The ring's design is too complete, its weight too overwhelming. To demand Frodo withstand it forever would be crueler than any orc blade. Instead, fate bends here through something stranger, messier, but truer to life itself. Salvation often arises from weakness rather than perfect strength. From shadow, Gollum erupts. Driven by obsession, savagery, despair, he attacks Frodo with all the madness built across centuries. They struggle wildly upon the edge, frail bodies locked in contest far more desperate than any clash of armies. Rings slip, chains rattle, teeth snap. And at last, in his frenzy, Gollum seizes it, tearing Frodo's finger clean away. He lifts the ring with ecstasy, dancing upon the brink. His triumph is grotesquely joyful, his precious reclaimed. Yet triumph lasts seconds only. He stumbles, he falls, and into fire he plunges, clutching the ring still as though love will preserve it. Flames consume both master and object in one. Thus ends the One Ring, not by Frodo's willing heroism, but by Gollum's lustful collapse. And therein lies Tolkien's profoundest paradox. Evil devours itself. The very obsession meant to preserve it ensures its ruin. Gollum's fall is Frodo's salvation, Mordor's unmaking, and proof that even flaws, horrifying though they are, can weave into greater tapestry. The fire roars louder, Mount Doom convulses. Towers shake across Mordor, Barad-dûr cracks and collapses, armies shriek in sudden despair. Sauron's eye, unbodied and frantic, blazes one final time across the land before dissolving utterly, presence shredded into nothing. Across plains, orcs scatter, shrieking without captain or cause, consumed by ruin. And Frodo and Sam, amidst the inferno, cling faintly to one another, waiting for death as mountain erupts. They do not cheer. There is no gleeful victory, but only weary relief, resting in each other's company as lava bursts upward around them. Rescue comes not by their planning, but by eagles descending on winds like thunder, the great birds sweeping them aloft from fire. In their talons, they are borne eastward away from ash, laid upon soft beds where shadow cannot reach. Their eyes close, too tired for triumph, too spent even for gratitude. This, perhaps, is itself the deepest commentary. Salvation is rarely clean. It is messy, incomplete, dependent upon chance and mercy as much as intention. As per the books, Tolkien narrates this climax with solemnity, giving voice to Frodo's utter collapse, his claim of the ring before losing it. In film, shock amplifies, the slow-motion echo on Frodo's face, Gollum's manic joy, the mountain shuddering like apocalypse. But both end with paradox, the ring destroyed not by chosen virtue, but by unintended stumble of vice. This complexity makes the victory poignant, human. Theories swirl endlessly here. Could Frodo have destroyed the ring if left another minute? Or was its compulsion absolute, unavoidable, with Gollum's fall the only path fate allowed? Some suggest that Eru Iluvatar, the divine thread Tolkien wove faintly into his world, meant for this outcome all along. Not willpower alone, but mercy shown years earlier when Bilbo refused to kill Gollum, then Frodo again showing pity, brought about this end. A reminder that compassion, even when it fails immediate justice, may ripple outward into salvation unforeseen. For you, tucked drowsily into blankets, this truth carries comfort. You do not need to carry burdens perfectly. You need not believe that success lies in unbroken strength. Sometimes failure itself becomes the doorway to grace. Frodo stumbled, but because pity stayed blades in earlier years, the stumble still ended in victory. Mount Doom's roar fades slowly now in your mind. The stone breaks, fire cools, ash begins to drift. And across Middle-earth, horns that once trembled in despair begin to echo in relief. Men, elves, dwarves alike breathe again. Mordor shrinks not into history drowned, but into memory that will never be unnamed. And you, dear wanderer, exhale also, knowing that the weight upon Frodo's shoulders has at last sloughed away. This is the release of the tale's climax, sharp, fiery, perilous, but in the end, soft in its meaning. Evil undone by itself, good preserved by mercy, and the smallest hands having borne the heaviest destiny. It leaves you soothed, not thrilled, because it confirms what bedtime stories have always hoped to whisper. Light can return, even through failure, even into dawn. And so, as Middle-earth begins to heal, the tale opens its final, slower coda. It will walk you not in fire, but toward havens, toward endings and farewells that heal as much with sorrow as with joy. Let your breath slow now as well, for the bursting fire has passed, and what remains is only twilight and the quiet tide carrying the last ships west. From the thunder of Mount Doom's collapse, the story does not rush toward its end but breathes out slowly, easing into calm after so much storm. For though the ring is gone and Sauron's eye scattered into nothing, Middle-earth does not close its book with a blast of fire. Instead, it lingers, healing through farewells, through homecomings, through the bittersweet truth that no one returns unchanged. You follow this easing as though upon a gentle tide, drifting now toward havens where endings soften into beginnings. The field of Cormoran, bright in Ithilien, heralds renewal. Here, beneath the open sky dappled in spring light, Frodo and Sam awaken to trumpets and cheers. Yet even celebration is colored by exhaustion. Their smiles falter beneath the weight of memory. They are lauded as heroes, garlanded in honor. Yet how can such fragile beings accept glory when still trembling from shadows? Their humility makes the crowd louder, as though love itself must carry what their own hearts cannot. You, lying half between waking and sleep, imagine their eyes blinking in disbelief, still half certain they dream, while the world, safe at last, celebrates around them. For Aragorn, too, the time has come. Crowned king of Gondor upon the White City's steps, he stands with bearing no longer of ranger, but of sovereign. His hand holds Andúril upright, his brow steady. Yet, even as kingship cloaks him, his eyes soften when they meet Arwen's. Her choice to remain, to relinquish immortal departure, binds them in bittersweet beauty. In him, Gondor sees not only a monarch, but the healing of bloodlines and of time itself. His reign begins not through conquest, but through restoration. And upon these ceremonies, Middle-earth seems rebalanced. Yet for hobbits, the echoing heart, triumph is different. They return at last to their Shire, that green rustic land of hills and burrows, and there they meet something stranger than all Mordor's fires, indifference. For though they have walked to the end of the world, many of their kin greet them with skeptical laughter or shrugs. The fields, though scarred in part by industry and Saruman's petty vengeance, still thrive. The brewery still brews. Children still laugh in cottages. How, then, can such small folk grasp what towers fell far away? It is both comfort and cruelty, this return. Merry and Pippin, taller now from drinking event draughts, seem out of place among kin shorter and less worldly. Sam, though bursting with longing to plant and grow again, feels the ache of distance between old innocence and new wisdom. And Frodo, Frodo bends beneath the heaviest sorrow. Though the green fields stretch warmly, his wound never fully heals. The knife from Weathertop, Shelob's sting, the ring's endless venom, all linger like shadows veiled just under skin. He smiles, yes, but faint. He eats, but little. Laughter reaches him slower. The Shire was his heart once, but now it fits around him with discomfort, like childhood clothes too tight for the adult frame. So the story turns to the Grey Havens, that final passage. Frodo confides that there is no full healing in Middle-earth for him. His hurt is deeper than gardens can supply. He must sail with Gandalf, with Bilbo, with Elrond and Galadriel, across seas that mortal eyes cannot follow. To Sam he entrusts both blessing and burden. The Red Book, stories completed, the Shire's stewardship. Their farewell pierces deeply, for in Frodo's embrace is love both unbroken and resigned. And though Sam weeps, though his heart cracks, he returns to hearth, to rosy cotton, to children's laughter, and somehow, most humanly, he continues. That is endurance too, though less sung. The others watch their friends sail west on white ship, sails billowing like soft ghosts against the evening sun. Middle-earth quiets. The third age closes. You can almost hear the keel scraping lightly against waves, gulls calling, then silence, as though the sea itself takes Frodo gently into safekeeping beyond mortal reckoning. And the rest remain, to tell stories, to build peace, to live. It is in this final rhythm that Tolkien writes one of his tenderest truths. Not all adventures heal, and not all heroes remain. Victory may preserve a world, but scars still ache. Yet this is not despair. It is reality tempered into gentleness. For those who live must cherish gardens again, plant flowers again, lift children onto knees again. And those who cannot remain, find rest further on, proving that completion exists even when mortals cannot glimpse its shore. Theories here often ask, was Frodo destined always to depart, or could healing have rooted deeper if ages passed? Was the haven's metaphoric grace, Tolkien's quiet Catholic yearning for heaven, or literal elvish passage, ships sailing west toward Valinor where even wounded souls may rest? Perhaps both, perhaps neither entirely. But the resonance is clear, universal. Journeys do not simply end, they transform into thresholds. And so you, in your bed, linger here in softness. For endings are not loud. They are whispered sighs, gentle farewells, lingering sense of spring after long winter. Think of Sam, stepping back into bag, and as Rosie greets him, children waiting. He removes his pack, tired yet finally able to rest, and sits. Simple, beautiful, final. Well, I'm back. That single arrival says more of endurance than any coronation. Let your breathing slow with them now, for the tale has carried you long across mountains, shadowed halls, rivers, fields, golden woods, storms, and fire. Allow the noise to ease, each moment of peril dissolving into memory, until what remains is only starlight shimmering upon quiet waters. The gray havens glimmer still, gentle waves lapping at the quays, sails billowing into the dusk. That hush, that peace, becomes your lullaby. See how the story balances itself. The storms of war answered by still homes, despair answered by gardens. Even great sorrow softens under continuity. Babies crying again in the Shire, sunflowers swaying along Hobbiton paths, smoke curling from chimneys. Life insists gently upon its return. And when you lie here, warm and wrapped close, it insists upon you as well, your own promise against all shadow, that new mornings come, slow but sure. What has Middle-earth taught you tonight? That even small hands can preserve the world. That loyalty carried further than strength. That pity, once dismissed as weakness, saved all. And that endings need not be glossy triumph. They can be bittersweet, quiet, incomplete, yet still beautiful enough to rest upon. Imagine yourself now beneath the party tree in Hobbiton, lanterns glimmering, fireflies dancing above grass. Children laugh across fields, voices hushed in distance. Stars hang like gems above, unthreatened at last, and peace at last restored. Frodo's story drifts away, but yours lingers still, weaving softly toward tomorrow. Close your eyes. Let your breathing fall into rhythm, slower, slower, like waves lapping the side of a ship already far offshore. Your own troubles, as heavy as they may be in daylight, soften in darkness just as Mordor's fires cooled. What remains is only rest, and the certainty that morning, your own morning, waits like garden dew renewed. So sleep now, dreamer of tales. Rest in assurance that though shadows lengthen, though paths wind, and though farewells must come, light endures. The stars over Middle-earth shine still, and their whisper carries straight into your pillow. All journeys end in peace if you walk long enough. The sails are already departing, glowing upon endless horizon. Let them carry your thoughts softly into dream. Have a good night.